Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Klondike Bishimbayev. Klondike Bishimbayev was born on April 11, 1980, in Gildorda, which was part of the Kazakh SSR. In 2000, Klondike began his career as a bank manager. He completed a short internship at the Ministry of Economy, then spent several years in senior roles at major companies before returning to the ministry. In 2016, he became the Minister of Economy, making him one of the youngest high-ranking officials in Kazakhstan. However, just 8 months later, he was dismissed due to a major scandal and was imprisoned for accepting large bribes. He received a 10-year sentence but was released on parole after 1 year. He later apologized to Nursultan Nazarbayev, the then president, who granted him a pardon. Klondike's personal life includes 2 official marriages before he met the future victim. His first marriage was to Agarim Rova in 1999, while he was still a student. They had a son, Alexander Valikin, in 2000, but their marriage ended in 2004. In 2006, while working as an advisor to the Minister of Economy and Budget Planning in Kazakhstan, he married Nazim Karmanbabagaleva. They were married for 14 years and had 3 children together. However, in 2020, Nazim initiated their divorce. Sultanat Nukhnova was born on May 15, 1992, in Pavlodar, a city in northern Kazakhstan. As a schoolgirl, Sultanat developed a strong interest in astrology. She thoroughly studied related literature and created horoscopes and natal charts for her friends and classmates. To her surprise, many of her predictions turned out to be quite accurate. Eventually, she decided to turn her hobby into a profession, and success followed quickly. Sultanat promoted her astrological services on social media, offering personal and online consultations. She provided both short-term and long-term forecasts, assisted people in achieving their goals, choosing careers, and finding spiritual growth. Additionally, she offered advice on love, assessed compatibility, and helped individuals navigate their relationships. Sultanat only worked with women and girls. She quickly became financially independent by earning good money from her passion, something she knew well and enjoyed. Her social media following grew significantly, and many people sought her services, leading to consultations being booked months ahead. She was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. In the spring of 2022, Klondike Bishimbayev, who was a dedicated fan, came across Sultanat's page on a popular social media platform. He was captivated by the young beauty and decided to reach out to her by signing up for an astrological consultation. However, she turned him down, explaining that she only offered services to women. This rejection only increased Klondike's interest in her. He persistently sought her attention by showering her with compliments and trying to win her over, insisting that she was the only one who could help him and that he exclusively trusted her expertise. Although Sultanat appreciated his flattery, she was determined to avoid meeting him, finding his behavior distasteful. He repeatedly offered her an online consultation, but she was firm in his refusal. For months, Klondike persistently tried to ask Sultanat out on a date. During this time, he learned almost everything about her: where she lived, who she interacted with, where she went, and what her interests were. Despite this, Sultanat continued to reject his advances but told her friends that she had an ardent admirer. Eventually, Sultanat agreed to meet him. Klondike made every effort to impress her. He was polite and courteous. However, that first meeting was only the beginning. In a candid discussion with her brother, Sultanat expressed that the man was not her type and that a relationship between them was unlikely. Initially, neither Sultanat nor her family was worried about the Klondike's behavior. She believed she could keep him at a distance, and her family and friends trusted that she could make her own choices. However, a month later, the situation began to shift. He found a way to get closer to Sultanat by reaching out to the eldest member of her family. He expressed a desire to speak with her grandmother and seek her blessing. This gesture affected Sultanat, but she still declined to pursue a relationship with him. Unexpectedly, in the fall of 2022, Sultanat visited her parents in Pavlodar and shared that she didn't expect any significant changes in her personal life. She confessed to her brother that she was troubled by the 12-year age gap with Klondike and felt no romantic attraction towards him. Additionally, her astrological calculations indicated they weren't compatible. However, less than a month after that visit, her brother stumbled upon a post on social media where Sultanat announced that Klondike had officially proposed to her and she had happily accepted. This news shocked the entire family, as it was completely unexpected. Even her friends were taken aback, as she had recently told them that Klondike was not the right match for her and she believed nothing serious would come of it. In December 2022, just a few months after they met, they held an extravagant wedding, featuring an expensive banquet at one of the most popular venues in Astana. It's important to note that their marriage was not officially registered. They only participated in a special marriage ceremony at a mosque and did not register their union with the authorities, so they were considered civil partners. During this time, Sultanat's feelings towards her partner changed significantly. She frequently shared with her friends how intelligent, educated, well-read, and articulate he was, and how he could easily engage in conversations on any topic. She also firmly denied any wrongdoing on his part in a high-profile corruption case that led to his brief imprisonment, insisting that he had been framed and was serving time for someone else's crime. On the surface, the couple seemed happy. Klondike showered his wife with gifts, and she affectionately referred to him as her golden husband, expressing that she had no regrets about marrying him. Their friends admired them and actually celebrated her marriage. However, this happiness was short-lived. The first warning sign appeared after their wedding when the couple moved into the home of the husband's parents. The parents lived on the first floor, while the newlyweds stayed on the second floor. Almira, the mother, tried to shower Sultanat with love and support, often giving her gifts and helping her from household chores. However, she was unable to protect Sultanat from her husband's behavior. Sultanat occasionally visited her parents with her husband, but she chose not to invite them to her home because it upset Klondike and led to arguments. Initially, her family was unaware of this, but less than a month after her wedding, her brother, Ibek, visited her on New Year's Eve and witnessed an uncomfortable situation. A large festive table was set up, but the celebration was meant to be a small family gathering. When her brother and his wife arrived with gifts for everyone, Sultanat felt embarrassed because she had no gift to offer in return. To resolve the awkwardness, she decided to give the woman a bottle of expensive perfume that her husband had bought for her the day before, which she hadn't opened yet. However, her actions not only upset her husband, they made him extremely angry. He yelled that she had no right to give away what he had given her and started insulting her. The guests, sensing the escalating tension, quickly decided to leave the house. The parents, attempting to defend their daughter-in-law, were abruptly silenced. To make matters worse, in his fury, Klondike overturned the table filled with food and drinks, ruining the New Year's Eve celebration. Ibek was taken aback by what he witnessed and was unsure how to respond. The following day, during a phone call, Sultanat revealed that her husband's behavior had drastically changed since their wedding. She didn't understand why and was hopeful that the situation would improve over time. Ibek advised her to come home and end the relationship, but Sultanat firmly rejected his advice. 2 months after the incident, Sultanat unexpectedly sent her brother some selfies. In these pictures, her face was covered with severe bruises, and she asked him not to ask her any questions. Concerned, her brother attempted to reach her by phone, but she didn't answer. He then called her husband, who agreed to meet for a discussion. During their meeting, Klondike, Sultanat's husband, told him to stay out of their affairs and refused to explain the bruises. He also couldn't tell him where she was, which left her brother feeling very uneasy. Fortunately, Sultanat was discovered in her parents' country apartment, where she had a set of keys. Despite her loved one's pleas, she decided to return to her husband, claiming that she loved him and was willing to do anything to save their marriage. For a while, her husband treated her well, showering her with gifts and promising to change for her. They even took a trip together to a popular resort in the Maldives, appearing very happy. However, later, the vacation photos revealing visible bruises on Sultanat's body and fingerprints on her wrists, suggesting she had been roughly grabbed. Ibek stated that neither he nor his parents had heard his sister mention any issues in her marriage since then, although her behavior and appearance changes were telling. She had lost a significant amount of weight and became more reserved. She started wearing outfits to cover up the bruises and cuts on her body. Additionally, she stopped taking appointments and ceased offering online consultations. On social media, she only posted photos with her husband, expressing her luck and love for him. As it later turned out, her husband prohibited her from pursuing her passion, leaving her without any income and fully dependent on him. He monitored all her actions and interactions. She needed his permission to meet friends or have lunch in a cafe without him. He even checked her phone calls and messages. Sultanat was only seen in public with Kwandike, who acted like a devoted and caring husband. Most of her friends were unaware of the distress she faced at home and even envied what seemed to be a perfect family. Once, Sultanat recently shared with a close friend that her husband controlled every aspect of her life. He forbade her from working, prohibited her from communicating with her parents without his permission, and was unreasonably jealous, often accusing her of infidelity. He also physically abused her. When her friend heard this, she was shocked and urged the woman, Sultanat, to leave her husband right away. However, Sultanat reacted by yelling and insisted that she wasn't seeking advice, she simply wanted to talk about her situation. Sultanat, seeking to save their marriage, sought help from a family psychologist. However, her husband dismissed all the options suggested by his wife and insisted on using his own specialist. During their sessions, this psychologist convinced Sultanat that she was solely responsible for their problems. In a recent conversation with her brother, Sultanat expressed her concerns that her husband had hired the psychologist specifically to belittle and demoralize her once again. In the summer of 2023, Sultanat tried to leave her husband and planned to stay at her parents' house for a while. However, just a week later, Kwandike came to take her back, asking her to give their marriage another chance. He suggested they move into his house, and Sultanat thought that a new environment might help their relationship. She also believed that having a child together would improve her husband's treatment of her, but she was unable to get pregnant. At the last family dinner in October, Sultanat attempted to leave her controlling husband and quickly sought a rented apartment with her brother's help. However, just 10 days later, she not only returned to him but also underwent the marriage ceremony again at the mosque, a fact she shared with her family. On November 5th, she invited her parents, brother, and a few close friends to a restaurant owned by Kwandike's brother, Bakitsan Bazanov, to celebrate their reunion. During the ceremony, her husband acted very gallantly and courteously, showing his affection for her and vowing to protect her, while always keeping an affectionate eye on her. That evening, everyone was convinced of his genuine feelings and words, but tragedy was just days away. On November 9th of the same year, Sultanat's brother returned home from work and was going about his day when he received a phone call. A relative, sounding frightened, asked him if the rumors circulating on social media were true. Confused, he asked her to explain what was going on. She then sent him a link to a news article stating that the former Minister of Economy had killed his young wife. Ibek was disheartened by the news but found it hard to believe what he read. Just the day before, he had spoken to his younger sister, who had once again mentioned that she planned to leave her husband. She had asked him if she could stay over at his place, and he told her she was welcome anytime, even pointing out where the spare keys were. However, neither that evening nor the following day did she come home, and her phone had been silent since then. The man hurried to his sister's house, but found it empty. Her husband was also not picking up his phone, and the situation was becoming urgent. They quickly decided to head to the family restaurant, where Sultanat had last reached out to them, to seek answers. While Ibek was on the way, he received a call from his parents, who had seen the news and wanted to understand what was going on. However, he couldn't provide them with any information and only assured them he would find out more. Many police officers were present in the restaurant. When they learned that Sultanat's relative had arrived, they immediately offered their condolences, explaining that Sultanat had died before the medics could assist her. Ibek was in disbelief. He thought it must be a terrible mistake, but the news was unfortunately true. Witnesses indicated that by the time Ibek arrived, Kwondike had already been arrested and taken to the station as the main suspect. Kwondike firmly denied any wrongdoing, describing the incident as a tragic accident and insisting that he had been trying to help his wife. Additionally, his brother and who was the restaurant owner, Bakitsan Bazanov, were also taken into custody on suspicion of involvement. In the beginning, the suspect's lawyer claimed that his client was completely innocent and pointed out the lack of evidence against him. However, it was later revealed that the ex-minister and his brother had destroyed crucial evidence by deleting video recordings from cameras inside and outside the restaurant. Fortunately, experts were able to recover the footage, which shocked everyone who saw it. The investigation into this complex case lasted nearly 4 months, during which Kwondike continued to assert his innocence. He acted as though he believed he could escape punishment, even as he faced serious charges of murder with extreme cruelty. Forensic experts who examined the deceased noted that they had never seen such extensive and severe injuries before. Some of these injuries occurred 6 to 8 hours before her death, suggesting she was beaten for a long time, leaving no uninjured areas on her face and body. Kwondike's lawyers attempted to downplay his responsibility. He himself claimed that most of his wife's injuries were self-inflicted due to her being drunk, stating that she frequently fell and hit her head on the bathroom tiles and furniture. According to Kwondike testimony, on the evening of November 8, 2023, the couple attended a concert by singer Dima Bilan with friends. During the concert, they had a heated argument, but the friends couldn't clearly explain what it was about. The loud music made it hard for them to notice that Kwondike and Sultanat was fighting. They initially thought the couple were just having a discussion. Suddenly, the couple left the concert hall without saying a word. They then went to the Bao restaurant, where they continued their argument privately in a VIP cabin. The camera footage reveals that Kwondike took several bottles of alcohol from the bar and went to a booth with his wife. While they shared a bottle of wine and talked about their relationship, she expressed her dissatisfaction and announced her intention to leave him. This infuriated Kwondike. He screamed at her, threatened and slapped her. Following this, she called her brother and informed him that she would be staying at his house for the night because she had decided to leave her husband. Around midnight, as she was leaving for her brother's house, her husband confronted her and continued the argument. The surveillance footage reveals that the couple argued for about 15 minutes. Eventually, the man persuaded his spouse to re-enter the building for a short time. Inside, they continued to fight in the vestibule before isolating themselves in a stall, where there were no cameras, leaving us to speculate about what happened there. Footage from the hallway camera captures Sultanat attempting to escape from her husband. She acted calmly and maintained her distance while he repeatedly tried to close the gap, grabbing her hands, shaking his head, and pushing her against the wall. Sultanat, unable to escape, tried to hide from her abusive husband by locking herself in the bathroom. However, he began to kick the door violently, causing damage as he attempted to break in. When he finally got in, he struck her multiple times in the face. He then said that she was dependent on him, claiming that he had met all her needs. The husband alleged that in a fit of anger, Sultanat stripped off her clothes and jewelry, flushing them down the toilet to show that she did not want anything from him. Alternatively, some accounts suggest that he forced her to undress to humiliate her. After the gold jewelry fell down the drain, Kwon became enraged and struck his wife multiple times in the face. He then pushed her forcefully, causing her to fall and hit the toilet. During the trial, he argued that his wife was drunk and had fallen several times while undressing, hitting her head on the tiles and plumbing. He claimed that they had planned to go home after leaving the restaurant, but he felt unable to drive because he had consumed too much alcohol. He also didn't want to call a cab because he was embarrassed by his wife's drunken state, as she was wearing a coat over her underwear. They returned to the booth in the same stall. Shortly after, the couple exited, but Sultanat paused to look at her injured face in the mirror. Her husband then aggressively pushed her towards the exit, leading to a violent confrontation. He brutally attacked her with his hands and feet and pulled her by her hair. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, he dragged her back to the VIP cabin. There, he ultimately caused her death, although during the trial, he claimed he hadn't harmed her, arguing that she had fallen and injured herself on the floor and furniture. He said that Sultanat lay on the sofa and fainted. He noticed a bruise on her face and felt worried, but instead of calling an ambulance, he contacted a fortune teller to see if everything was okay with his wife. The fortune teller assured him that she was just drunk and needed rest, which made Kwon feel more at ease and decide not to interfere. He mentioned hearing snoring, which he later realized was actually a death rattle. Around noon, he realized his wife was no longer breathing and urgently called his brother, Bakitson, for help. They decided to close the restaurant and asked the staff to leave. After that, they erased footage from all the CCTV cameras. During the trial, Bakitson stated he trusted his younger brother's claim that Sultanat was just drunk and asleep and agreed to delete the recordings, which he believed showed her behaving inappropriately and bringing shame to herself and her family. Bakitson only called an ambulance later in the evening, by which time her body was already cold and rigor mortis had set in. He claimed he attempted to resuscitate her, but it was too late. Sultanat had already passed away. The investigation also focused on Nazim, Kwon wife and mother of his 3 children. A few years prior, when the ex-minister was arrested for corruption, she defended him publicly. However, shortly after his release, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and stating that she had outgrown their marriage. However, after her ex-husband was publicly accused of brutally murdering his new wife, Nazim gave an honest interview. She acknowledged that he was indeed capable of such a crime. Nazim shared that they had been married for 14 years, but after the birth of their second child in 2011, her husband became aggressive, selfish, and narcissistic. He began to think the world should revolve around him, with his opinions as the most important. Furthermore, he constantly cheated on her, without any effort to hide it. Kwon was arrested in 2017, and it was only then that Nazim discovered the full extent of his infidelity by accessing his personal data on his phone. She learned that he had multiple mistresses, who frequently changed. After he was released by the Pardon Commission, he became increasingly violent and aggressive. A month later, a minor disagreement escalated between the couple, and in a fit of rage, he smashed the toilet lid and threw it at Nazim. Nazim successfully avoided confrontation, but in that moment, she understood that her marriage had come to an end. She believed that Kwon had suppressed his darker tendencies for a long time, knowing she would not accept such behavior. However, he did not hold back when it came to humiliating and insulting his mistresses, who were unable to resist him. Regarding Sultanat, Nazim thinks that Kwon deliberately selected his target and tested her patience and willingness to endure. Once he realized she would stay quiet and wouldn't leave, he revealed his true nature as a refined sadist. The trial started in March 2024, and it quickly became apparent that it would be challenging. The family of Sultanat demanded that the trial be as transparent as possible, allowing journalists to attend and the public to observe the proceedings. They were concerned that Kwon might leverage his wealth and extensive connections to pressure witnesses and judges in an effort to evade a severe punishment. He requested a jury trial, which was approved. A total of 12 jurors were chosen, 10 main jurors and 2 alternates, along with the presiding judge. Kwon had previously been convicted of a serious crime but was out on parole. A new serious offense could have led to a life sentence. In a jury trial, he would only face the death penalty if every juror, along with the judge, unanimously agreed. The chances of this happening were very low, so he held on to that hope. During the trial, he repeatedly claimed he was not guilty of premeditated murder with particular cruelty, arguing that the incident was accidental and resulted from a tragic mix of circumstances. He stated that his spouse provoked him by insulting him, yelling, and becoming physically aggressive. However, numerous recovered video recordings from surveillance cameras presented evidence that contradicted the initial claims. The authorities initially attempted to charge him with domestic violence, a crime in Kazakhstan that, due to lenient laws, does not carry severe penalties. This decision sparked significant criticism, particularly from the family of Sultanat. Her mother, in court, expressed her heartbreak over being unable to say goodbye to her daughter due to the severity of the injuries, while fearing that her son-in-law might face only a minor punishment, which shattered her faith in justice. In response to the public outrage, a new law was enacted in April 2024 to impose stricter penalties for domestic violence in Kazakhstan. Kwon pressured his brother, who was accused of being an accomplice, to provide false testimony to help him avoid consequences for his actions. However, Bakitson requested the court to protect him from Kwon, and this request was granted. Throughout the hearings, Kwon made numerous attempts to disparage his late wife, labeling her as inadequate, unbalanced, and an alcoholic who frequently cheated on him and provoked his anger. He tried to persuade the court that he acted out of passion that night and only struck his wife a couple of times, claiming those injuries were not fatal. He argued that all her other injuries were self-inflicted due to her frequent intoxication. He claimed that the bruises on her neck were caused by attempts to revive her, insisting that he was trying to help. But his brother, Bakitson, stated that Kwon prevented him from calling for medical assistance for Sultanat and was more interested in deleting footage from the cameras. Kwon then instructed him to take her cell phone back to their home to make it look like she was moving around the city, tricking her brother, Ibek, into believing she had returned to the apartment, even though he was monitoring her location. During the 9th hearing, he and his lawyer asked for the judge to step down, claiming they was biased. Their request was denied, and the judge continued overseeing the trial until a verdict was reached. On May 13, 2024, he was found guilty of serious charges, including inflicting bodily harm, torture, and murder of his common-law wife. He received a 20-year sentence for murder and an additional 7 years for battery and torture. In total, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. His brother, Bakitson Bazanov, was also convicted, received a 4-year prison sentence for providing shelter. The court considered his lack of prior legal issues, his genuine remorse, and his full cooperation with the investigation. However, the family of the victim, Sultanat, expressed their dissatisfaction with the ruling. Her father had hoped for a life sentence for his former son-in-law, claiming that any lesser sentence would be unjust. Meanwhile, Sultanat's brother pointed out that a 24-year prison term for the 44-year-old defendant effectively amounted to a life sentence. The tragic story of Kwon Bishimbayev and Sultanat Nukhnova serves as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic abuse and the complexities of relationships marred by control and violence. Despite Sultanat's initial dreams of independence and success, her life took a harrowing turn, ultimately leading to a heartbreaking end that shocked her loved ones and exposed the darker aspects of her husband's character. This narrative underscores the critical need for awareness, support systems, and interventions to protect individuals from the perilous cycle of abuse, highlighting the importance of listening to and believing victims before it's too late. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Courtney Holden. Courtney Holden was born on February 28, 1992. When she was 2 years old, she was sent to an orphanage. Life there was not happy, not only for Courtney but for all the other children. Every day at the orphanage began with a prayer. Children of all ages prayed to the Almighty to give them a family and a happy life. Finally, Courtney's dream came true when she was adopted by the Holden family. Courtney arrived in Spokane at the age of 4 and began living in the Holden family home with Joshua and some other foster children. However, instead of finding a loving family as she had hoped, her life here was worse than at the orphanage. What Courtney experienced at the Holden home could only be described as a real nightmare. From a young age, she was forced to do all the housework. She had to clean the whole house and wash the dishes after every meal for the entire family. If she made a mistake, she was punished. Surprisingly, the Holden family treated the other foster children better. No one understood why they disliked her so much. Judy Holden was old when she adopted Courtney, and she was the last child they had received from the orphanage. Perhaps this explains their inexplicable cruelty and hatred towards Courtney. She was forbidden to go out without permission and was often abused. Visitors to the house often heard Judy and Joshua calling Courtney Cinderella, as if she were in a fairy tale, but in reality, she was more like a slave to her cruel stepmother and siblings. Courtney was very sensitive and had become accustomed to a difficult life with the Holden family. She feared her foster mother and felt terrified just seeing her brother Joshua. He did not allow her to communicate with her friends. She was not allowed to use a cell phone or other modern devices. She was only allowed to leave the house when necessary and always had to ask for permission. She only enjoyed fresh air and chatted with her neighbors when she was alone in the backyard. However, she became accustomed to this life and did not feel bitter. She still respected her adoptive parents because they were the only family she knew, and she had no concept of a normal family. Courtney experienced a period of freedom when Joshua, due to conflicts with their parents, moved in with his sister for an extended time. For Courtney, this was the happiest period of her life. She finally experienced the freedom she had always longed for, allowing her to go out, walk around, and meet friends. After finishing school, Courtney fell in love for the first time. Michael was an ideal partner. She felt the care and attention from him that she had never received from anyone else. Every time she met Michael, Courtney felt extremely happy. Their relationship lasted until 2011, when they had a son. Michael was eager for Courtney to move in with him to create a complete family. However, for unknown reasons, Courtney refused this offer. She continued to live in a Holden household, which she did not like, and ended her relationship with Michael. After the Holden family went through many changes, their home became deserted. The adopted children grew up and left, and John Holden, Courtney's adoptive father, was passed away. For a while, Courtney lived with her adoptive mother, Judy, and sometimes her son Joshua was allowed to visit with Judy's permission. Their life was quite peaceful when Joshua, Courtney's brother, was away. However, after their father died in 2014, Joshua returned and began causing trouble for the family. He installed many surveillance cameras around the house on Hero Avenue, near Rogers High School in Northeast Spokane. Signs that said, "Smile, you're being watched," were placed all over the yard, with cameras pointing in many directions. This made Courtney nervous because she knew that going out would get her in trouble with Joshua. Courtney's life once again became difficult and uncertain. Around 2015, Courtney revealed to a neighbor that she was again deprived of her right to use a cell phone, manage her social media accounts, communicate with people outside the family, drive, or leave the house without Joshua's permission. After Courtney gave birth, Joshua became so bitter that he forced her to cut off all contact with the baby's father. Courtney silently complied. The neighbor noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms. When asked, she frankly admitted that Joshua hit her. They were worried and did not understand why Courtney would endure such abuse. They tried to help her by reporting it to the police, but the Holden family always tried to suppress the matter. This was partly because Courtney never publicly admitted that she was being threatened by her brother. Eventually, Courtney was forbidden to talk to neighbors and was only allowed to go out at night. She silently complied. Courtney knew Joshua better than anyone. He was a large, overweight man with considerable strength and was often abusive. Friends of Joshua described him as paranoid, ruthless, and unpredictable. He had bragged in public about his ability to easily end a life and dispose of a body without difficulty. He had a notable criminal record. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but due to lack of evidence and the victim's unwillingness to cooperate with the police, he was released. He was also suspected of assaulting and sexually abusing a woman in 2003 when the perpetrator could not be identified. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and burglary. These incidents forced him to flee his parents' home for several years. After returning, Joshua became more violent. He kept complete control over Courtney. She largely cut off contact with her friends, saying she was afraid to go out for fear that Joshua would find out and make things worse. A friend kept in touch with Courtney every day on Facebook until Joshua found out. In her last message, nearly 2 years ago, Courtney said, "I have to go. Joshua is coming home soon." After that, her account has since been permanently deleted. Those who know the Holdens say the family's relationship is unusual. They are surprised that Courtney's child calls Judy mom and Joshua dad, while only calling his biological mother by her first name. This has led some to suspect that Joshua may be the child's biological father. Neighbors and acquaintances have criticized the Holdens' odd lifestyle and antisocial behavior, and have tried to stay away from the house. In August 2018, after an argument, Courtney tried to leave the house with a suitcase of belongings. Her mother, Judy, yelled at her to go home, but Courtney refused. Joshua forcibly took Courtney back into the house. Judy closed the door, and Courtney was unable to escape. This was the last time the neighbors, and perhaps anyone outside the family, saw Courtney. After that, she lived a life of isolation from the outside world. It took nearly 2 years for people to start worrying about her disappearance. In October 2019, Michael expressed concern about not seeing her for nearly 2 years. He wanted to see the child, so he reported Courtney missing to the police on October 24th. The police went to search Holden's house and were surprised to find Courtney was not there. Joshua and Judy refused to cooperate. Judy only allowed the police to look through Courtney's room and then told them to leave. A search dog was used but found nothing. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her child and run away. However, they could not explain who was withdrawing Courtney's Social Security benefits and using her electronic food stamps. On the day the police searched the house, Judy and Joshua withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Crime Information Center, saying she was safe and did not want to be searched. Police traced the call and found that the woman was Courtney's half-sister. Joshua and Judy later gave conflicting explanations for Courtney's disappearance. They said she ran away with a truck driver and then with a secret lover. Courtney's absence, along with the changing accounts of those who lived with her, made it clear that the Holdens were hiding something. In late October 2019, Joshua and Judy Holden abruptly left Spokane, leading detectives to suspect they were involved in Courtney's disappearance. They were found in Texas, at the home of one of Judy's adopted daughters. Authorities were able to charge them with withholding Courtney's welfare and identity theft, leading to their arrest in Texas. In early October, the Spokane Police Department wanted to check on Courtney's status. The case quickly became a missing persons investigation, which was assigned to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser. Courtney was officially declared missing. Alerts were sent to all states, and the media picked up the story, triggering a widespread search. When police and detectives went to check on her home, Joshua and Judy Holden have continued to refuse to cooperate with the investigation. Beside that, Randy told the vet he was worried Courtney might be dead and mentioned he was particularly concerned about Joshua's history of violence. Joshua had been charged with assault in the past, but the case was dismissed when the victim stopped cooperating with prosecutors. Investigators are now gathering DNA evidence and court records from that case, which show Joshua was also suspected in another attack in 2003. Neighbors and family described Joshua as mentally unstable, cruel, and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. One neighbor revealed that Joshua was unemployed and that Judy feared him. The neighbor said Joshua and Judy often bragged about how they had eluded the police. Joshua also claimed that killing and hiding a body was easy. Especially when you have kids, you can't just disappear, said Detective Randy. Courtney was also described in court records as a devoted mother who never abandoned her children. For more than 18 months, Courtney was confined to her home and was not allowed to leave. Joshua and Judy gave neighbors and relatives various excuses for her absence, from traveling with her truck driver boyfriend to running away with her fiancé. At one point, they said she was home but not available to receive visitors. When Randy visited their home in early October, Judy claimed that Courtney had just returned home a few days earlier and was taking a walk with her son. However, when asked for her phone number, Judy slammed the door. The police then forced her to let them in to check Courtney's room. According to Randy, Judy appeared very nervous about the situation. According to Randy's court records, the house was extremely messy with items piled everywhere, including on the kitchen counter. Courtney's room was also in disarray, with an empty mattress. Randy commented that it appeared that no one lived there. At one point, Judy panicked. When Randy asked to check the rest of the house for Courtney's child, Judy ordered the investigators to leave. Later that day, a neighbor informed Randy that they had seen Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leave in a truck, along with a child. Detective Randy also became suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. She received her last prescription in July 2017, although she had been taking her medication for months before she disappeared. Despite gaps in her medical records, money continued to be withdrawn from Courtney's bank account each month, and her EBT card was used to purchase groceries. Surveillance footage confirmed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. They was also caught on camera withdrawing the remaining money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing in early October. On October 24th, Joshua and Judy left the home. When police arrived to execute a search warrant, Randy noted that they discovered the DVR from the security camera system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were also missing. By mid-November, Joshua and Judy's cell phone numbers had been canceled. However, that same day, 2 new phone numbers with Texas area codes were activated on their accounts. About a month after the Holdens moved out, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was actually one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They said they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years and that Judy was retired. However, there were inconsistencies in their information. The man told the police that Joshua and Judy had a child, while Judy's daughter insisted that the child was Courtney's. In mid-December, Randy traveled to Texas to look for Joshua and Judy. Police found them at Judy's daughter's house, along with Courtney's son. Joshua and Judy Holden were arrested on multiple charges: identity theft, interference with child custody, unauthorized use of Courtney's bank account, and concealment of her child. The child was found safe and returned to his father. No other family members have been charged with any crime. Police searched Judy's home in Spokane with a search dog but found no trace of Courtney. A search of a home in Texas also turned up nothing. Police also searched a car and trailer belonging to Judy at an RV park in Oklahoma. Joshua, 40, and Judy, 74, are currently in custody in Texas and have refused to answer police questions. They also refused to be extradited to Spokane. With insufficient evidence to prove their involvement in Courtney's disappearance, it is likely that Joshua and Judy will be released. This is perhaps one of the most mysterious disappearances ever. "I have 4 notebooks full of different information," Randy said of the month-long investigation. Judy and Joshua continue to maintain that they had nothing to do with Courtney's disappearance, while police believe she is likely dead but have unfortunately not been able to prove it. Domestic violence experts point to a number of factors as to why cases like Courtney's are not always reported. One is the societal assumption that someone else will take care of it. According to Morgan Kern, Director of Counseling and Outreach at the YWCA, fear of retaliation can also be a factor. And people sometimes view it as a family issue, something to be dealt with at home. Although Judy and Joshua have been accused of multiple acts, they have not been charged directly in Courtney's disappearance. However, many still suspect they knew what happened. Joshua not only had a history of aggression but had also claimed to be capable of killing and hiding a body from the police. Investigators believe Courtney is dead, but no suspects have been arrested in the case. To summarize today's story, it is sad that Courtney was victimized by the Holden family. This young woman longed for a loving family but did not have the courage to defend herself. She believed that the people who abused and exploited her were still family. But does a real family need to make you defend yourself like that? Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a warm afternoon in Palm Beach, Florida, a man named Mohammed came to the police station to Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a warm afternoon in Palm Beach, Florida, a man named Mohammed came to the police station to report a disturbing incident. He said that a woman named Delilah had approached him and offered to hire him to kill someone. Although Mohammed did not provide Delilah's last name, the Palm Beach police considered the information credible and began an investigation. They had to establish Delilah's full identity and find the husband she wanted to kill. With this limited information, detectives began an investigation to clarify the case and prevent a possible murder. To gather more information, the detectives decided to use the witness Mohammed to arrange a meeting with Dalia. They chose the mobile gas station as the meeting location because, according to Mohammed, Delilah lived nearby. At the gas station, the detectives arranged several cars to monitor the meeting. Before Delilah arrived, they instructed Mohammed on what to say. They also attached a small recorder to Mohammed so they could listen in on his conversation with her. While monitoring the mobile gas station, the detectives unexpectedly witnessed a meeting between Mohammed and Delilah. Delilah's appearance made a strong impression on the detectives, as she did not resemble the usual image of someone who wanted to hire someone to kill her husband. Instead, Delilah wore a skirt and a tank top, looking very attractive. After the conversation, Delilah got into the car with Mohammed. At this point, Mohammed expressed his surprise, unable to believe that a woman like Delilah would lure him into a murder for hire. Mohammed asked Delilah if it was worth killing her husband. Delilah said yes, because she could not get a divorce. She was afraid that her husband would come after her if she tried to end the marriage. Delilah revealed her plan: after her husband was killed, she would go somewhere else, like Boca Raton, to create an alibi. Mohammed asked if anyone would suspect Delilah after her husband's death. She replied that no one would suspect her. The detectives were listening to a conversation between Mohammed and a woman. They were shocked to hear the woman calmly discussing hiring a hitman to kill her husband. This made the detectives shiver. As the conversation continued, Mohammed made specific moves on the woman. She showed Mohammed pictures of her husband so he could identify the target. The detectives were shocked by Delia's nonchalance about the consequences of her actions. She spoke so calmly that it sounded like she was discussing a normal business transaction, not planning a murder. However, detectives realized that they needed to gather more evidence to strengthen the case. She suggested to Mohammed that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and pay him later. After concluding the conversation about hiring a hitman to kill her husband, she got back in her car and left the mobile gas station. Detectives followed her home to determine where she lived. Records showed that the address belonged to someone else named Dippolito, and police concluded that she had used a false name to hire a hitman to kill her husband, not Delilah as they had previously thought. Detectives ran a background check on the car Dahlia used to go to the gas station to meet Mohammed. They found that the car's registration was held by Mike Dippolito, Dahlia's husband. To their friends, Mike and Dahlia appeared to be a happy couple in love. They met when Mike was feeling bored and looking for a way to entertain himself. He surfed the internet and found a website that offered escort services. Mike decided to book a meeting, not knowing that this decision would change his life forever. When Mike's escort, Dahlia, arrives, he is immediately enchanted by her beauty. He finds her stunning and feels an attraction between them. They instantly connect and quickly fall into intimate conversation. Over the next few days, Mike and Dahlia's relationship deepens. They meet again and spend a week together. They have a great time together, and they realize that their feelings have gone beyond friendship. From there, Mike and Dahlia officially become a couple. After a few months of dating, Mike and Dahlia's relationship takes a significant step forward. During a visit to a local jewelry store, they unexpectedly looking at engagement rings. This leads to a deep conversation about marriage, a topic they had discussed before. Fascinated by the idea of building a future together, Mike decides to buy a ring for Dahlia. It was not only a gift, but also a symbol of his commitment to the relationship. Even though their relationship was moving forward quickly, Mike was still extremely happy in love. He believed that this was the right move for both of their futures. Before meeting Dahlia, Mike had a criminal record in 2001. He was convicted of theft, fraud, and wire fraud in Broward County, Florida. At the time, Mike was addicted to drugs and needed money. The court sentenced Mike to 2 years in prison and 28 years of probation. This long probation period was to give Mike the opportunity to pay off his debts. When Mike first returned home from prison, he had trouble paying his debts. Determined to solve this problem, Mike took a job as a cook at a restaurant for $350 a week. However, this was not enough to pay off his large debt. Mike wanted to improve his financial situation to pay off all his debts and ensure that he did not have to go back to prison. Fortunately, a friend introduced Mike to a new job at an office near his home, just 4 blocks away. This gave Mike the opportunity to move from his job as a chef to the field of email marketing, opening up better financial prospects. When Mike and Dahlia began their relationship, Mike was honest about his difficult past and current restrictions. He explained that he could not freely travel between states without permission. Dahlia, with her strong passion for travel, expressed her desire to explore the world with Mike. Realizing that the financial burden was hindering their dreams, Dahlia proposed a bold solution. She was willing to give Mike $91,000 so that he could pay off the remaining debt. This money would help them get out of debt and start a new life, free to travel like Dahlia had always dreamed of. At that time, Dahlia was working as a real estate agent and making a lot of money. With her stable finances, she was able to help Mike pay off his debt and clear his criminal record. Mike consulted his lawyer about how to handle the situation. The lawyer advised him to prepare enough money to be released from probation. After discussing, Dahlia and Mike decided to transfer the money to Dahlia's Bank of America account because it was the safest and most convenient way. Mike's joy about paying off his debt and getting married was quickly shattered. One day, he received a text message from Dahlia informing him that she had transferred the money to his lawyer. Mike contacted the lawyer to confirm, but was surprised to be informed that they had not received any money from Dahlia. 2 days after the transaction, the lawyer still has not received the money. Mike contacts Dahlia, asking her for information about the money transfer and a receipt for verification. However, Dahlia suspects that the lawyer has misappropriated the money. She tells Mike that she will try to get the money back. Meanwhile, Mike hopes that they can resolve this misunderstanding smoothly. On the other hand, the Boone Beach Police Department enlists the help of Sergeant Whitey Jean, an undercover police officer. When he meets with the detective in charge of the case, Sergeant Jean is informed that Dahlia is trying to hire a hitman to kill her husband. The detective tells him that Dahlia is waiting for a call from the hitman and asks Sergeant Jean to pose as the hitman to arrange a meeting with Dahlia. Sergeant Whitey Jean agrees to participate in the investigation by posing as a hitman. In this role, he contacts Dahlia and asks her to pay $3,000 up front and the keys to her house. The request for the keys was part of a plan to make Dahlia believe that the murder would occur at her home. However, Dahlia felt uncomfortable with the request. She contacted Muhammad, who had introduced her to the hitman, to express her concerns. During a phone call between Muhammad and Dahlia, the detectives overheard and were concerned that they might have scared Dahlia. They feared that Dahlia might change her plans and find someone else to kill her husband. However, on August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean in the CVS parking lot. Sergeant Whitey was working undercover, posing as a hitman. However, Dahlia did not have any money with her. Sergeant Whitey informed Dahlia that if he waited until after the murder to be paid, she would have to pay him $7,000 in cash. Sergeant Whitey Jean announced the assassination plan on Wednesday morning, citing the cover-up as a response to looting in the area. He revealed to Dahlia that he would stage a fake break-in to give the act the appearance of legitimacy. Whitey Jean made it clear that he intended to pretend to break into the house, then shoot Mike twice in the head. Sergeant Whitey Jean informed Dahlia that he would wait a few days before contacting her again after the murder of her husband. He explained that the police would be watching her closely after such a serious crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean emphasized that this wait was necessary to avoid suspicion and to keep the case secret. During the conversation, he also gave Dahlia the opportunity to back out of the hit-for-hire plan. But Dahlia asserted that she was absolutely certain and determined to carry out the plan to kill her husband, Mike. She revealed to Sergeant Whitey Jean that Mike walked his dog at a fixed time every morning and left the house unlocked when he left. This information was key to the plan to kill Mike. Dahlia also said she would be at the gym at the time of the attack, ensuring that she would not be home when Sergeant Whitey arrived to carry out the plan. Sergeant Whitey Jean asked Dahlia to be at the gym by 6 a.m. He announced that he would be at Dahlia's house at 6:30 a.m. After finishing his conversation with Dahlia, Sergeant Whitey Jean was shocked by her cruelty. Although he had met many people in his work, he had never met anyone as cruel as Dahlia. The detective thought that creating a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's house was important to see Dahlia's reaction. On the day of the attack, around 5:30 a.m., Dahlia told Mike that she was going to work out. Mike agreed but found it strange because Dahlia had never worked out so early. However, he did not think much of it and continued with his normal morning routine. The detective followed and confirmed that Dahlia had gone to the gym. This provided the evidence the detective needed to continue with his plan. However, before he could proceed with setting things up at Mike and Dahlia's house, the detective needed to inform Mike of the current situation. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left the house to go to the gym, there was a loud knock on the door. Mike rushed to open the door and was surprised to see a group of police officers standing in front of the house. He was shocked and confused and asked what was going on. A detective walked in and told Mike some shocking news. His wife had hired a hitman to kill him. However, the hitman was actually an undercover cop assigned to expose Dahlia's plot. The detective further explained that the whole situation was an elaborate plan set up to catch Dahlia in the act of hiring a hitman to kill her husband. Mike was shocked when the police came to his house and informed him that his wife, Dahlia, had hired a hitman to kill him. After calming down, the detectives emphasized the urgency of the situation and asked him to leave the house immediately. They quickly took Mike to the police station for safety. The detectives created a fake crime scene at Mike and Dahlia's house. They put up police tape and turned on the police car lights to make it look like a real crime scene. After they were ready, a detective called Dahlia and told her that the police were at her house and needed to talk to her about a matter involving her husband. The detective asked Dahlia to come home and answer some questions. After speaking with the detective, Dahlia returned home and was shocked to find that her house had become a crime scene. Police tape surrounded the house and police cars were parked everywhere. When Dahlia asked the detective about the situation, she was informed that the police had received a report of a murder at her house, accompanied by gunshots. The detective then gave her the shocking news that a search of the house had turned up the body of her husband, Mike. This information shocked Dahlia. She burst into tears as soon as she heard the news of her husband's death. However, the detective, who was experienced in announcing the death, noticed that Dahlia's reaction was unusual. Although she appears to be crying, the detective does not see any tears on her face at the police station. The detective begins the investigation by asking Dahlia about the people who may have been involved in her husband's death. The detective's goal is to get Dahlia to admit that she hired someone to kill her husband. The detective tells Dahlia that her husband was shot twice in the head and died. Dahlia is confident that Mike will not open the door to strangers. She explains that Mike is currently on probation for securities fraud and is trying to complete his probation. However, this is difficult because the community is not supportive of Mike's upcoming release due to the amount of debt he owes. Despite this, Dahlia insists that their marriage is stable. During the investigation of Mike's husband's murder, the police interrogate her. Mike watches the interrogation from another room. The detective informs Dahlia that they have the facts of the case and will begin investigating. They then led Sergeant Whitey Jean into the room, handcuffed, and asked Dahlia if she knew him or had met him before. Dahlia firmly denied any connection to Sergeant Whitey Jean. After the police escorted Sergeant Whitey Jean out of the room, the detective informed Dahlia that she was under arrest for attempted murder. The detective further explained that the man Dahlia had hired to kill her husband was actually an undercover police officer. As a result, Dahlia was arrested for her crime. While Dahlia was in custody, the police allowed Mike, Dahlia's husband and the victim of the attempted murder, to see her. When Dahlia saw Mike, she tried to call him back, but Mike refused, saying that he could not help her in this situation. In fact, Mike wanted Dahlia to admit to plotting to kill him, but she still firmly denied her actions. On April 26, 2011, Dahlia DiPolito's trial was held in Palm Beach County District Court. Dahlia was charged with conspiring to hire someone to kill her husband, Mike. During the trial, Mike testified against his wife. He testified for 3 consecutive days. Dahlia's defense attorney argued that the plan to kill Mike was just a publicity stunt for a reality television show. They claimed that Mike had agreed to participate and helped orchestrate the plot. However, Mike denied all things. He claimed that he had no knowledge of or involvement in any such plan. Mike stated that he had no interest in participating in a reality television show and would never waste money or put himself in danger for that purpose. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for hours and ultimately found Dahlia guilty of solicitation of first-degree murder with a firearm. When the verdict was announced, Mike had mixed feelings. He was relieved that Dahlia was serving a 20-year prison sentence, a fair sentence for her serious crime. At the same time, he was relieved that he could finally move on with his life, knowing that justice had been served. After Dahlia was convicted of solicitation of first-degree murder with a firearm, her lawyers appealed. They argued that the jury's verdict had been influenced by an unofficial tip. Specifically, a juror had commented that Dahlia had tried to poison Mike's Starbucks drink. However, this information was never introduced into evidence at trial. By law, juries are only allowed to evaluate evidence that is formally presented in court. As a result, the Court of Appeals overturned Dahlia's conviction and decided that she was entitled to a new trial. Mike was surprised to learn that there would be a second trial for Dahlia, even though she had been convicted of conspiring to kill him. In December 2016, the state held a second trial, believing that they had enough evidence to prove that Dahlia had incited her husband to kill her. However, the outcome was not as expected when the jury could not reach a consensus. Ultimately, the judge decided to hold a new trial. Dahlia faced a third trial in June 2017. After the trial, it took the jury just 90 minutes to reach a final verdict. They found Dahlia guilty and sentenced her to 16 years in prison. In September 2019, Dahlia Dito asked the Florida Supreme Court to review her 2017 conviction. However, the court denied the request without comment. After Dahlia was convicted, her defense team attempted to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court for review. However, in February 2020, the court declined to take it. Despite this, Dahlia DiPolito's attorneys told the press that they were undeterred and were still determined to overturn the conviction. They revealed plans to petition a federal judge for a third review of Dahlia's trial on constitutional grounds. The attorney said this was Dahlia's last chance to secure a new trial. Despite serving her sentence, Dahlia was respected in prison for her strong faith. She organized a Bible study group in prison, which was praised by her fellow inmates. Before going to prison, Dahlia had a young son who visited her regularly. The boy is now living with his grandmother until Dahlia completes her sentence. According to her lawyer, the separation has been heartbreaking for Dahlia because she misses her son very much. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Heidi Firkus. Heidi Firkus was born on December 14, 1984, as the youngest child and only daughter among the 3 children of John and Elinda Erickson. She lived a fulfilling life, known for her cheerful personality and artistic talents. After graduating from high school in 2003, Heidi attended Northwestern University in Roseville. She was a regular at Calvary Chapel, where she had been involved since childhood. At church, Heidi met Nick Firkus. They both became youth group leaders, serving the community with dedication and passion. Nick was born on February 25, 1983, to Julie and Steve Firkus. He is an ambitious and dynamic young man, working as the CEO of a reputable carpet cleaning company. Nick is known for his well-rounded personality and good work ethic. He found his ideal partner in Heidi, whom he met at Calvary Chapel. In 2005, Nick and Heidi, then 22 and 20, were married at the church where their love began. The wedding took place surrounded by family and friends. To outsiders, their marriage seemed perfect. They both loved traveling and cycling, were active in church activities. Heidi began working at her father's financial services company in an administrative role. Their relationship seemed to grow stronger over time. However, their lives were not what they seemed. Little did Heidi know that her life was about to take a turn. On the morning of April 25, 2010, a tragic event occurred in St. Paul, Minnesota. Heidi called 911 to report an intruder in her home. Just 38 seconds into the call, while Heidi was giving her address, she suddenly yelled, "No," and a gunshot rang out. 65 seconds after the first shot, Heidi's husband, Nick, used her phone to contact 911 again. He said in desperation, "Please, someone just broke into my house and shot me and my wife." During the call, Nick sobbed and repeatedly screamed, "Oh Heidi, my wife is dead, please come here." He also screamed, "No," in pain. When police arrived at the scene, they found Heidi lying unconscious in the kitchen with a gunshot wound to her back. Nick was lying next to her on the floor, still talking to 911. He looked very distressed and had a wound to his left leg. Nick told police that one or two intruders had broken into their home. He grabbed a handgun and tried to flee with his wife through the back door, heading towards the garage. However, the intruder grabbed the gun from Nick and shot both of them. Meanwhile, Nick was taken to the emergency room for treatment. There, police questioned him about why he and Heidi left their bedroom, which was supposedly safer, to face potential danger. Nick explained that they were just trying to escape the house through the back door. After being treated for his injuries, Nick was released from the hospital after only 3 hours. Nick was called back to the police station for further questioning about the incident. He recounted in detail what happened. Nick said he remembered that he and Heidi watched a movie and drank alcohol together that night. They went to bed around midnight. Nick said he woke up the next morning, between 6:10 and 6:15, to the sound of the screen door opening and someone trying to unlock the front door. Investigators asked Nick about the door being locked. Nick admitted that he and Heidi usually locked it, but he thought he had forgotten to do so on the night of the incident. Upon hearing the strange noise, Nick said he retrieved the handgun from the upstairs closet. He explained that he had brought it up from the basement a month earlier because it had begun to rust. Initially, the gun was unloaded, but he loaded it when he heard the noise. He then woke Heidi and asked her to call 911. He instructed her to leave the house and go to the garage, where they had parked their car, as part of a safety plan they had agreed upon in case of danger. Although right-handed, Nick held the handgun in his left. He followed behind Heidi, protecting her as they moved towards the garage. Nick said that he and Heidi stopped at the front door to get her purse. Suddenly, the door opened and a man rushed in. The intruder was dark-skinned, about 6 feet 1 inch tall, weighing between 200 and 220 pounds, and wearing a dark-colored hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled tightly around his face. Nick said the intruder grabbed his handgun. They struggled, and during the scuffle, the gun went off. Nick explained, "My finger accidentally touched the trigger. Heidi was running away, so I may have hit her in the back." Nick recounted the incident that the first shot hit Heidi, causing her to fall immediately. He and the intruder continued to wrestle for the gun. During the struggle, the gun went off again, hitting Nick in the upper thigh. He fell to the ground from his wound. At that point, the intruder escaped through the front door. Nick told investigators that Heidi became unconscious after being shot, and he later lost consciousness due to his wound. Nick told the police that their home was going to be foreclosed on the following day. They planned to inform family and friends of the situation that same day. Nick explained that, due to falling behind on their mortgage payments, their home had been repossessed and sold. Although they had to leave, they hadn't told anyone about it. Their plan was to pack up on Sunday and leave some items in the garage for pickup later on Monday morning. They planned to find temporary accommodation, but life took a different turn. Brendan O'Connor, a neighbor who was cat-sitting at a nearby home, reported to police that he heard an argument followed by gunshots. He also heard someone shouting for help. "You shot her. You shot me. Please, please don't." Although no one saw the intruder flee, Nick provided police with a sketch of the suspect a few weeks later, which was released to the public. Police described the suspect as an unidentified man, 6 feet 1 inch tall, weighing 200 to 220 pounds, and wearing a dark-colored hoodie. About 3 weeks after the murder, the police showed Nick an artist's sketch of the suspect based on his original description. In this updated report, Nick further described the suspect as African American, estimated to be between the ages of 40 and 60. Based on this information, the initial investigation focused on finding the unidentified African American intruder. Police searched the surrounding area extensively, hoping to find evidence or witnesses to corroborate Nick's account. However, the investigation into Heidi's death did not result in any arrests or charges. As a result, the case remained unsolved for many years. More than a decade later, Heidi's murder remains unsolved. Nick appears to have moved on with his life, marrying Rachel and starting a family. However, when financial troubles resurface, Rachel begins to suspect that her husband has hidden secrets. Nick's reluctance to discuss his finances makes Rachel even more curious. She begins to dig deeper and discovers irregularities in Nick's past. These discoveries make Rachel question everything she knows about her husband, including his possible involvement in Heidi's death. Rachel is unaware of the couple's financial troubles, similar to Heidi and Nick's situation years ago. Concerned, Rachel contacts the authorities, bringing attention to the case. Investigators then focus on Rachel Firkus, Nick's second wife since 2012. While speaking to the authorities, Rachel reveals that she divorced Nick in 2019 due to his worsening financial problems. She also recorded an argument with Nick about his affair before their divorce. "He definitely did the same thing he did with Heidi," Rachel told investigators. "I saw a letter warning us that we hadn't paid our property taxes and were at risk of being evicted in 2020 if we didn't pay." When Rachel reported her suspicions to the police, the Heidi murder case was reopened. Sergeant Nicole Sipes of the St. Paul Police Department was assigned to the case. She listened carefully to Rachel's concerns and began reviewing all the evidence. Determined to find the truth, Sergeant Nicole took a bold step. She asked the FBI to help analyze the 911 call recordings. She hoped this would lead to new clues that would shed light on what happened the night of Heidi's murder. After a thorough examination of the recordings, the FBI found no evidence of a third party being involved. This was surprising because it contradicted Heidi's husband's previous statement to the police. Sergeant Nicole and her team were puzzled by this new information. If Heidi and her husband were the only ones in the house, then what exactly happened between them that led to her death? The absence of a third person further raised suspicions about the husband's involvement in the murder. The investigation continued to intensify in order to find the truth. New discoveries by the FBI opened up new lines of inquiry. Sergeant Nicole was more determined than ever to bring justice to Heidi and provide answers to her grieving family. Investigators collected financial documents that contradicted Nick's previous statements, making him the prime suspect in Heidi's murder. Nick's account of the incident kept changing. Initially, he said that the intruder had taken his gun and shot both him and Heidi. He later testified that the intruder did not take the gun, but that he had accidentally pulled the trigger, hitting Heidi in the back. After a thorough investigation, investigators found no signs of a break-in, such as overturned furniture or marks on the walls. The forensic analysis of the scene did not match Nick's account of the incident, especially regarding the direction in which the bullet struck Heidi. Additionally, Heidi did not mention seeing the intruder in the 911 call. The lack of evidence of a break-in made investigators suspicious. They believed it was part of Nick's plan to cover up his role in Heidi's death. As a result, an arrest warrant was issued for Nick on May 19, 2021, more than 10 years after Heidi's death. SWAT arrested Nick at his home in Mounds View. The arrest was the result of Rachel's suspicions and the investigative efforts of Sergeant Nicole Sipes. Many were surprised because the case was thought to be dead. As the trial progresses, the details of the case will be revealed, and the truth about that fateful night will gradually come to light. The big question on everyone's mind is whether Nick was responsible for Heidi's death. After Nick was arrested, Heidi's family said, "We are incredibly grateful to everyone who has worked tirelessly to bring this case to this stage. We also thank everyone who has prayed for and supported us over the years. We hope that these charges will help to clarify the truth and bring justice to Heidi. While we cannot bring Heidi back, we believe she would have wanted us to find the truth. God is glorified by the truth. Heidi's life and memory are further honored by the truth being revealed." The family expressed relief, gratitude, and determination to find the truth. They thanked those who persisted and the community's support, hoping Nick's charges will bring justice. When the case went to trial, Nick maintained his innocence. His family, especially his father, also believed in Nick's innocence. They believed that Nick's deep love for Heidi could not have led him to commit murder. However, the jury had a different view. After 10 hours of deliberating the evidence, on February 10, 2023, they reached a surprising verdict. Nick was convicted of brutal murder. This decision left everyone who knew Heidi stunned and in disbelief, especially since Nick was the person Heidi trusted the most. During the trial, the prosecution detailed the defendant Nick's difficult financial situation. They argued that Nick had kept his financial problems from Heidi and, fearing embarrassment, decided to kill her. The prosecution also questioned Nick's story about the home invasion, arguing that it could have been a cover-up for the crime. Compelling evidence was presented that there were no signs of forced entry into the home, there were many inconsistencies in Nick's testimony, and no DNA or physical evidence of an intruder was found. These factors reinforced the prosecution's argument that Nick was the perpetrator, not an intruder as he claimed. The lack of evidence cast serious doubt on the veracity of Nick's story. At the trial, the prosecutor accused Nick of not wanting to face the truth about his deceitful behavior, leading him to take the extreme step of killing Heidi to protect his reputation. Defense attorney, in contrast, argued that the transition from financial hardship to murder was unreasonable. He also argued that the idea of killing his wife to save his reputation was absurd and had no psychological basis. After a thorough trial and careful consideration of the evidence, the jury unanimously found Nick Ferris guilty of first-degree murder. On April 13, 2023, the judge handed down the harshest sentence possible. Nick would serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite his guilty verdict, Nick Ferris maintained that he had nothing to do with the death of his wife, Heidi. He maintained his innocence, even after his conviction. Currently, Nick is serving a life sentence at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in St. Cloud, Minnesota. However, the motive for the murder remains unclear, leaving us to wonder what drove Nick to commit this regrettable act. However, the investigation revealed that in June 2009, Nick received a foreclosure notice on his home. The house was then auctioned off at a sheriff's auction that same month. About 10 months before Heidi's murder, the eviction process began in February 2010, and a hearing was scheduled for March 8, 2010, which Nick attended alone. The original closing date was April 9, 2010. Nick contacted attorneys, claiming that his grandmother was in the hospital and dying, and asked for the closing date to be moved to April 26th. When investigators looked into the matter, they found no evidence that Nick's grandmother was actually in the hospital or had died in 2010. When they asked if Heidi knew about all of this, Nick claimed that Heidi was fully aware of their financial difficulties. He added that they had planned together to leave the foreclosed house and start a new life elsewhere. But the truth is that Nick killed his wife to hide his financial troubles from her. He was too ashamed to admit that he owed $118,000 in credit card debt and was 22 months behind on his mortgage. Although justice has been served, the pain and loss of Heidi's loved ones will remain. No punishment can undo the harm done or bring back the beautiful life she lost so cruelly. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Chris Coleman. Chris Coleman was born March 20, 1977. He is a former military. Chris Coleman met his future wife Sherry while he was serving in the Marine Corps, and she was in the United States Air Force. For Sherry, it was love at first sight. She immediately knew Chris was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Just a few months later, Sherry became pregnant with their first child, Garrett. Both devout Christians, Chris and Sherry decided to get married before Garrett was born. Chris called his father, Ronald Coleman, to tell him about the marriage and the upcoming baby. Although surprised, Ronald was delighted to learn that Sherry was pregnant. After Garrett was born, Chris and Sherry quickly had a second son, Gavin. Gavin had an energetic personality, while Garrett was calmer, like his father Chris. Both boys were happy and well-behaved. Sherry loved her sons dearly and was protective of them. Chris was a wonderful father, and they built a happy family. The family often laughed, played together, and cherished every moment with their sons. After leaving the military, the Coleman family moved to Waterloo, Illinois, a small town. They lived in an upscale neighborhood thanks to Chris's new job. He became the director of security for Joyce Meyer, a famous televangelist and CEO of one of the largest Christian evangelical ministries in the world. However, Joyce Meyer's multi-million-dollar income and lavish lifestyle caused controversy. Some critics claimed that she was a greedy con artist who preyed on the fears of her followers. They argued that her wealth and lavish lifestyle contradicted the religious teachings she preached. Chris was Joyce's personal bodyguard and protector. His main job was to monitor and prevent hate mail and threats sent to Joyce's church. These letters often threatened Joyce's life, with the sender claiming to find and harm her. Joyce's ministry, based in St. Louis, Missouri, hired Chris as a bodyguard. The job paid him $100,000 a year, providing financial stability for his family. In addition to his security duties, Chris often accompanied Joyce on international trips. He was always by her side to ensure her safety. However, this meant that Chris was away from home for long periods of time. According to Sherry, one year Chris worked for Joyce and was away for 260 days. This was stressful for her because her two sons, Garrett and Gavin, missed their father very much. The boys did not like it when their father was away and would mark the days on their calendars to count down the days until he returned. They kept looking at the calendar, eagerly awaiting the day he would return. When Chris returned home, he was away again shortly thereafter. Chris's frequent absences caused a lot of stress in his marriage to Sherry. Sherry was tired of doing everything by herself, playing both mother and father. She felt overwhelmed and underappreciated. This continued to have a negative impact on their relationship. In October 2008, Chris visited Tampa, Florida, where Sherry had attended high school. Before the trip, Sherry contacted her old friend Tara Lintz and asked her to look after Chris while he was in town. After arriving and settling in, Chris reached out to Tara. They decided to meet up, and Tara enthusiastically showed Chris around Tampa. At around 11 p.m. on November 14, 2008, Chris received a disturbing email. The email was sent from destroychris@gmail.com, and the subject and content were alarming. The letter demanded that Chris stop working for Joyce Meyer or he and his family would be killed. In the following days, several similar threatening emails were sent from the same address, repeating the threat and giving specific times when his family would be attacked. Notably, the sender of these emails seemed to know Chris's schedule, even his travel plans abroad. Chris informed Sherry of the threatening emails he had received and reported them to the local police the following Monday. He explained that he was often away from home due to his work with Joyce Meyer. The police offered to patrol the area while Chris was away. Despite the increased police patrols, Sherry remained concerned about her family's safety. She invited a friend to stay with her while Chris was away because she felt unsafe being home alone. Sherry emphasized that she was serious about protecting her family and would do whatever it took. To prove her seriousness, Sherry revealed to her friend that she had a gun. She even gave instructions on how to use the gun in case someone broke into the house while she was away. 2 months after the Coleman family began receiving the death threats, a mysterious letter appeared in their mailbox. The letter was delivered directly to them, with no identifying mark on the sender. The message was written in bold letters. The letter contains that, "Renounce your God in public," or, "There will be no more chances. Time is running out for you and your family." The threat was serious and clear. It showed that if the Coleman family did not comply, they would face dangerous consequences. Sherry was extremely frightened when she received this threatening message. The invasion of her private space and the direct threat to herself and her family made her feel extremely anxious throughout the following period. Sherry's fear increased, as the letter served as a warning of the danger lurking around. After receiving the death threat, Chris and Sherry Coleman decided to increase security measures to protect their family. In an effort to protect their family, Chris installed security cameras around the house. These cameras recorded continuously and streamed live to a monitor in the basement office. The footage was stored on a digital recorder, creating a permanent record. Chris hoped that this system would help him identify the person threatening his family. After Chris installed security cameras outside the house, the threats against the Coleman family stopped. Life for Chris, Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin gradually returned to normal. By April 2009, things had improved dramatically. Sherry told everyone that she felt her marriage was better and was determined to keep it that way. She expressed relief that the death threats had stopped and that she was happy with her life. Her hopes were quickly dashed when a new letter arrived at the Coleman home. This time, the content of the letter was more serious, warning that the worst was about to happen to her. Sherry's husband, Chris, was concerned about the contents of the letter. He decided to check the security camera footage from the night before. To his surprise, he spotted a suspicious figure in the footage, but could not identify the person. This new incident once again raised Sherry's fears and concerns about the safety of her and her children. She lived in constant fear of what might happen. The sense of security she had felt when the threats had subsided was gone. Now, Sherry felt as if her worst nightmare was about to come true. Local police stepped up their efforts to protect the Coleman family from the increasingly serious threats. Justin Barlow, a detective sergeant with the nearby Columbia City Police Department and a neighbor of the Coleman family, took a special interest in the case. Detective Justin took the initiative to call Chris Coleman. During the call, Justin said he had noticed that Chris was often away from home for work. The detective offered his assistance and provided his cell phone number so that Chris could contact him if he needed help or had any concerns. Detective Justin Barlow lived across the street from the Colemans and had installed a surveillance camera at their entrance. He assured Chris Coleman that he could respond faster than the police in an emergency because he lived nearby. For weeks, Justin's camera recorded the Colemans as they went about their daily routines, but failed to detect who had left the death threat. Despite Detective Justin's efforts to investigate, the videos provided no clues or information about the sender of the mysterious messages. On the morning of May 5, 2009, Chris arrived at the gym at 5:45. About an hour after leaving the gym, he called home to check on Sherry and her sons who were awake and ready for school. However, no one answered. Chris called his neighbor, Detective Justin Barlow. At 6:45 a.m. Detective Justin prepared the necessary items such as weapons, handcuffs, flashlights, and radios before going to the Coleman house. While waiting for backup from another unit, he decided to contact Sherry to check on the situation. With a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, Detective Justin approached the Coleman house and knocked loudly, hoping someone would answer. When he arrived, Detective Justin felt uneasy by the suspicious silence that pervaded the house. The lights were off and there was no sign of movement inside, which only added to his anxiety. A few minutes later, a police cruiser arrived to assist. One officer was assigned to check the back of the house, trying to look through the windows or back door for any sign of Sherry and the boys. They discovered signs of forced entry into the basement. This discovery made Detective Justin concerned for the safety of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, as there might be someone in danger inside the house. They decided to enter the Coleman home through the basement to investigate. When the officers announced their presence, no one answered. They conducted a thorough search of the basement and discovered a disconnected video cable at the computer desk. This led them to the conclusion that the security camera's video recorder had been removed. They left the basement and went up the stairs of the Coleman home. As they moved, they began to smell a strong odor of spray paint. The odor became stronger as they approached the main floor of the home. When they reached the upper floor, they found the walls spray painted with several offensive messages directed at Chris and Sherry's family. 13 minutes after the call ended, Chris returned home from the gym. Detective Justin asked Chris to stand outside while they searched the home. Chris complied, not asking questions or trying to get in, but just sitting quietly on the porch. Shortly thereafter, a third officer arrived. All three officers were aware of the urgent task of searching the remaining rooms of the house for Sherry and the boys. Upon reaching the second floor of the Coleman home, Detective Justin entered the bedroom of Garrett, the eldest son in the family. Initially, Garrett appeared to be sleeping. However, after a closer examination, the detective discovered that Garrett was dead. His body showed no signs of life and was cold. There were strangulation marks on Garrett's neck, indicating that he had been murdered. The detective was shocked to find Garrett's lifeless body. In the next room, another officer checked Gavin and was horrified to find that the boy was also dead. Both brothers had signs of strangulation. The killer also left an obscene message painted on the bed sheets, adding to the horror of the scene. Meanwhile, an officer entered the master bedroom and witnessed a horrifying scene. Sherry was lying motionless on the bed, dead like her sons. Her hair obscured her face. The police determined that Sherry had been murdered. When they examined the room, they found numerous bruises on Sherry's body. These injuries indicated that she had fought back, defended herself, and tried to protect her sons before she was killed. Detective Justin and the officers had just discovered the bodies of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin. At that time, Chris was waiting outside, hoping to hear news about his family. Detective Justin was forced to inform Chris of the heartbreaking news that his entire family had been murdered. Hearing the news, Chris was completely devastated and extremely distressed by this unbearable news. Detective Justin took Chris aside to give him some privacy to process the information he had just received. As the situation took in, Chris had a very strong reaction. He felt nauseous and his body felt like it was collapsing. Chris curled up into a ball, unable to control his emotions. He was completely overwhelmed by the shock and could not believe that his family had been kidnapped in such a brutal way. In a moment of desperation, Chris tried his best to contact his father, Ronald. He called and informed him that something had happened to Sherry and the boys. As soon as he received the news, Ronald realized that Chris was in a state of shock. He could not believe that such a tragedy had happened to his family. News of the gruesome murders involving Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin quickly spread throughout the Waterloo, Illinois community where the Coleman family lived. When the neighbors woke up to hear the terrible news, they were all devastated and confused. The Coleman family was once considered a model American family, with 2 sons, Garrett and Gavin, who were cute and loved by everyone. A neighbor shared that everyone wished their children were like Garrett and Gavin because they were always polite and kind-hearted. Sherry's family could not accept the brutality of this murder. After discovering his wife and 2 sons murdered, Chris was taken to a nearby police station for questioning. Justin asked Chris to explain the case. Chris expressed deep remorse for leaving Sherry and the children home alone while he went to exercise. During an interview with Justin, Chris claimed that he did not know who might have killed his family. However, the detective noticed some suspicious points in Chris's behavior. Most notably, Chris did not ask about how his wife and sons were murdered. This lack of interest struck the detective as odd, especially given the severity of the case. It suggested that Chris may not really want to know the details of his family's deaths. During the interview, Justin noticed that Chris tried to hide the scratches on his arms. Despite the warmth of the room, Chris asked for a blanket to cover the wound. This alarmed Justin, as he knew that Chris's wife, Sherry, had put up a fight before she was murdered. When the detective asked about the source of the scratches, Chris explained that he had gotten the scratches while installing a satellite dish the day before. During his interview with detectives at the police station, Chris adamantly denied having an affair. However, he did admit to having a close friend, Tara Lintz, a Florida cocktail bartender and high school classmate of his wife's. Chris admitted that his wife would not approve of them talking to each other. However, he insisted that he had no intention of leaving his wife for Tara and said he would never betray his family like that. The investigation took a turn when a detective contacted Tara in Florida. Tara revealed that she and Chris were not just friends, but had been having an extramarital affair since November 2008. She provided police with her cell phone and laptop, which contained evidence such as emails, intimate photos, and videos that she and Chris exchanged during the relationship. When confronted with this information, Chris admitted that he saw Tara more often than he had initially told detectives. A detailed investigation revealed that Chris and Tara had a secret plan to meet at places where Chris worked for Joyce Meyer. They often chose exotic locations such as Hawaii to have private time away from their families. Chris argued that his relationship with Tara was not an affair, as he believed that an affair required a deeper commitment. However, detectives found important information on Tara's phone and computer. She had a calendar with her wedding date and planned vacations, suggesting that she believed Chris would leave his family for her. This evidence made detectives skeptical of Chris's testimony, as it contradicted his claim that their relationship was not serious. Chris's father, Ronald, was shocked to learn that his son was having an affair with Tara. However, he insisted that the relationship had nothing to do with the murder of Chris's wife and son. Ronald described Chris as a gentle, quiet person with no violent tendencies. He believed his son could not have committed such a serious crime. Although detectives believed that Chris' relationship with Tara could have been a motive for the murder, the initial investigation did not find enough evidence to charge him. As a result, after 6 hours of questioning, Chris was allowed to leave the police station without being charged. Tara was linked to the murders of Sherry, Garrett and Gavin Coleman, but was later ruled out as a suspect when police confirmed that she was in Florida at the time of the family's murder on May 5, 2009. The case led to the largest investigation in Illinois history. A task force of 25 detectives was established, working 20 hours a day for 15 days with the assistance of specialists. The main focus of the investigation was to trace the source of the threatening emails sent to Chris Coleman. Police scrutinized every threatening email Joyce Meyer Ministries had received over the past year, investigating across the country. All of the people who sent emails to the Joyce Meyer Ministry were tracked down and questioned, but none of them were linked to Coleman's murder. A team of computer experts was called in to investigate the Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin murders. Detectives sought their help in the hopes of finding digital evidence of the crimes. The team began by analyzing the diaris@gmail.com email account. During their investigation, they discovered that the email address had been created on November 14, 2008, just days before the first email was sent. A shocking discovery was that the death threats sent to Chris Coleman's family actually came from Chris's own IP address. Investigators continued to investigate by carefully analyzing the spray paint at the scene and Christopher Coleman's handwriting. They took photos of the spray paint and collected samples of Christopher Coleman's handwriting as evidence. These samples were sent to a handwriting expert. After comparing them, the expert concluded that the handwriting matched the spray paint. From there, investigators determined that Christopher Coleman was the person who wrote the words on the wall of his home on the day of the murder. Chemical analysis revealed that the spray paint at the crime scene was Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red. A detective contacted the manager of the spray paint store after learning that Chris Coleman had made a purchase there a few days before his family was murdered. The manager confirmed that Chris had purchased the same Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red spray paint. This finding was significant because it linked Chris Coleman to the paint used at the crime scene. The time of death played a key role in the investigation. Chris initially told police that he left home at 5:45 a.m. on May 5, 2009, the morning his family was murdered. However, an autopsy revealed that Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin were killed around 3 a.m. This indicated that Chris was still home when his family was murdered, contradicting his initial statement. 2 weeks after the bodies were discovered, Chris was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued that Chris was motivated by greed, selfishness, and narcissism. It appeared that Chris wanted to start a new life, and his family became an obstacle. In April 2011, Chris was put on trial for the murders of his wife Sherry and sons Garrett and Gavin. Prosecutors told the jury that Chris killed his family because he wanted to be with his lover, Tara Lintz. However, he could not divorce Sherry because he feared losing his high-paying job at Joyce Meyer Ministries, an organization that did not accept divorces. During the trial, Chris's defense attorney argued that his client was innocent of the family murders. They alleged that an intruder entered the home and killed the family on May 5, 2009. However, 2 years after the murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, Chris was convicted of murder. The judge sentenced Chris to life in prison without parole, rather than the death penalty. This decision was made because the state of Illinois had abolished the death penalty, which was expected to take effect just months after the case. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Karina Vetrano. On Tuesday, August 2, 2016, Karina Vetrano met her father, Philip, after work. They had planned to spend time together as family gatherings had become increasingly rare due to everyone's busy schedules. Karina was juggling 2 jobs at the time. Philip picked her up and took her to his home, where they shared stories about their week. As Karina prepared to head home, she invited her father to join her for a jog, an activity they often did together. However, Philip declined, explaining that his back was hurting badly and he thought he might need a new prescription or that the change in weather was affecting him. He offered to call a cab for her instead. Karina turned down the offer because she was focused on training for an upcoming marathon, and thought jogging would be helpful. Unbeknownst to her parents, this would be the last time they saw their daughter. At 5:45 p.m., she left her father's house to go for a jog. Starting at Spring Creek Park, a peaceful oasis surrounded by greenery in the heart of the city. Large parts of the park are inaccessible due to dense bush and swamps, so Karina's father, Philip, advised her to run her usual route to avoid strangers and unexplored paths. However, Karina's desire for solitude led her to disregard her father's advice. She wandered into a deserted, grassy area. Karina's tranquil moment was short-lived. A severe pain struck the back of her head, and she collapsed. This careless decision proved fatal for she. 2 hours had passed since they bid farewell to their youngest daughter, and she was nowhere to be found. The Philip household became enveloped in anxiety and uncertainty. She should have returned home by now or at least responded to her parents' calls, as she had promised to carry her cell phone with her. Karina's father sensed something was wrong and decided to seek help from his neighbor, who happened to be the chief of the New York City Police Department. Since they had a good relationship, the chief knew Philip wouldn't contact him without a valid concern. After that, Karina was reported missing, and police launched a search for her, focusing on the park area and surrounding streets. Experienced canine units were brought in to aid in the search. It's well known that the first 24 hours after someone vanishes are the most critical and revealing. To maximize the chances of finding the missing person, law enforcement utilized every resource available. Meanwhile, Philip, along with a group of volunteers, conducted his own search for his daughter. He thoroughly scoured the park, making phone calls as he searched. As dusk fell, Philip spotted something in the grass and walked towards it. As he approached, he recognized Karina's phone and hoped she might have just misplaced it. However, as he cautiously made his way through the thicket towards the police officers, he stumbled upon something in the grass. He then stumbled upon the partially undressed body of a female corpse lying face down. Philip turned the body over and was met with a devastating sight. It was the face of his daughter, Karina. A heart-wrenching scream burst from Philip's chest as he realized the unthinkable. It turned out his daughter Karina hadn't lost her phone as he initially thought. The truth was far more devastating. Karina had lost her life. The police rushed to his side as he let out a desperate cry. They gently pulled him away from Karina's body, explaining that the area was now a crime scene and everything needed to be protected as evidence. The silence of the car ride home was oppressive, punctuated only by Mr. Philip's tormented thoughts. He was consumed by the daunting task of breaking the news to his wife about their daughter's tragic passing. Memories of Karina's life flooded his mind. He remembered the day she was born, July 12, 1986, in Queens. From a young age, Philip had been incredibly proud of his second daughter, Karina. She was a model child, obedient, well-mannered, and diligent in her studies. One of his fondest memories was taking the little girl to school for her first day. Karina's academic prowess had led her to earn a master's degree in speech pathology from St. John's University, a testament to her hard work and determination. Karina always wanted to help children, particularly those with autism. Additionally, she was a talented individual with a variety of interests, including traveling and writing. She was also an avid sports enthusiast, with a special fondness for running. Her and her father's similar passion for running brought them closer together. Philip remembered how he had protected her from those who were courting her, not wanting anyone to hurt her. He hoped that one day she would find true love and build a strong family like his own, giving him and his wife wonderful grandkids. As Mr. Philip approached his home, he felt the weight of his emotions. Taking a deep breath, he mustered the strength to put on a brave face. He knew his family needed him to be strong. His wife met him at the door and saw the pain in his face. She didn't need him to say a word, she immediately understood what was wrong. She rushed to his side, embracing him as she burst into tears. Karina's loved ones were understandably shocked and distraught when they learned about her sudden death. It was difficult for them to accept the brutal nature of the attack. The investigation revealed that Karina had put up a fierce struggle. Her clenched fists were proof that she had resisted her attacker until the very end. Injuries such as bruises and abrasions were found on her body, and her athletic clothes were torn. The autopsy revealed that Karina's death was ultimately caused by asphyxiation. However, her skull had also suffered blunt force trauma, likely from being hit with a stone. A visible mark on her neck further confirmed the violent nature of the attack. The forensic examination supported the police's initial suspicions, indicating that the crime was both deeply personal and extremely brutal. Further evidence of the struggle was found under Karina's fingernails. Dirt and grass were found embedded under her nails, indicating she attempted to pull away from her attacker. Specialists also examined her mouth, discovering that several of her teeth were cracked and knocked out, indicating that she had bitten down in self-defense. Karina's neck showed multiple scratches, evidence of the intense struggle she went through. Her attacker's grip had been unrelenting, prompting Karina to grab at her attacker with all her might in an attempt to force them to let go. Karina's strong will to survive was evident in her fierce resistance, and she fought valiantly for her life. Following her tragic death, another disturbing discovery found in Howard Beach, Massachusetts, where Karina lived. A second jogger's body was found in a secluded area with dense foliage, causing concern that a serial offender may be at large. To investigate these similarities, geneticists compared DNA samples collected from both crime scenes. DNA samples were discovered on both victims. However, the DNA analysis yielded an unexpected result. The samples did not match, indicating they belonged to different suspects. Notably, one DNA sample was found under Karina's fingernails, on her back, and on her phone. Despite the small amount, investigators were able to successfully analyze the evidence. The DNA found at the crime scene was the only lead in the investigation, providing a way to identify the killer. Given that most murders are committed by someone known to the victim, the police couldn't rule out any possibilities. To explore this, Karina's father submitted his DNA for testing, as he was the first person to discover her body. Unfortunately, the testing was done on the same day as Karina's funeral. Karina's other relatives also underwent DNA testing, but no matches were found. Investigators then conducted interviews with Karina's relatives and friends to determine if she had any enemies. However, everyone they spoke to seemed to respect and love her. As a result, the investigators came up with a new theory. The crime was likely committed by someone who targeted Karina because of her physical appearance and was driven by impulsive desires. Feeling stuck, authorities turned to the public for assistance, offering a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to the killer's capture. The public responded in large numbers, with over 250 leads, 600 genetic tests, and more than 1,700 reports being compiled. However, despite the extensive effort, the investigation remained unresolved. One major challenge was the possibility that the perpetrator had no prior record of crime, making it even more difficult to identify and catch them. On August 31, 2016, a utility worker reported seeing a suspicious person near the scene of Karina's death. He told police that he saw a man emerge from the bushes in a restricted area of the park and run north. The New York Police Department created a sketch of the suspect based on his description. However, by December 2016, they acknowledged that this individual may have been an innocent bystander. The release of the sketch did not yield any new leads, and the investigation came to a standstill. The Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the case on December 4, 2016. According to the FBI, the perpetrator was likely familiar with the area, especially the park where the crime occurred. This suggested that the attacker may have lived nearby, which is why they thought it was an ideal location to commit the crime without being detected. As a result, the police were cautious not to show their emergence in the area, knowing the perpetrator might be avoiding them to avoid capture. To follow up on the investigation, the police also conducted screenings of local African American men who fit the suspect's description. However, this effort did not lead to any breakthroughs in the case. Detective John Russo, who was part of the investigation, recalled an important detail. He had noticed a young man in a hoodie frequently walking around the park. John even tried to follow him out of curiosity about his strange behavior. The young man moved slowly and paused for extended periods in front of houses near the park, as if he were looking for targets to rob. However, then John lost track of him. 2 months later, a store owner reported seeing a person who looked similar. This made John rethink his earlier observations. He re-examined the file of a teenager matching the description, whose name was Chanel Lewis. Detectives became interested in Chanel because of his strange behavior. They started asking questions to his friends and teachers to gather more information. It was discovered that Chanel had shown interest in harming the girls, which made investigators more suspicious of him. No other leads, officers decided to focus on Chanel. Chanel's life was unremarkable, mirroring that of many young African Americans in Brooklyn's low-income housing. He resided in a housing complex several miles from Spring Creek Park, where he lived with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. Chanel was unemployed, but despite being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he managed to graduate from a private school catering to students with emotional and behavioral challenges. Chanel's former classmates described him as a quiet and isolated individual who was frequently bullied and belittled by his peers. He had no close friends and was often ridiculed for his appearance and clothing choices. However, after being teased, Chanel would typically smirk and walk away rather, earning him the derogatory nickname African Lizard. Not everyone saw Chanel in a negative light, though. A classmate named Danielle remembered him as intelligent, with good grades, who would occasionally share amusing videos with her on the bus. Danielle never witnessed Chanel displaying cruel behavior. According to some sources, Chanel once claimed that he wanted to slit the throats of all the girls in high school. He then asked, "What if he bring a knife to school?" However, Dr. Edward Dana, the executive director of Lewis's school, asserted that Chanel never harmed anyone during that time, nor was he disciplined. Despite this, Chanel struggled with bullying during his teenage years, which left him traumatized. Nevertheless, he aspired to work in social services, driven by a desire to help people in distress. Whenever conflicts arose at home, he would often take long walks, frequently visiting a local park. Chanel had a few minor run-ins with the police. 2 incidents occurred in the Spring Creek area for ordinance violations, and another took place in May 2016 for urinating in public. In another incident, a store owner reported he for loitering with a crowbar, but responding officers released him after checking his ID and finding no prior incidents. The police kept this information on record. It was later discovered that during the time of Karina's death, Chanel was not at home. After an argument with his family, he had gone to the park. Upon his return, his appearance was disheveled, with torn clothing and visible bruises and abrasions. Chanel's mother inquired about what had happened, and he claimed he had been attacked. His account matched the timeline with a witness's description of a man fleeing the park. Additionally, on August 3, 2016, Chanel's father, a former school principal, took him to the hospital for treatment of severe wounds, most of which were cuts, and he also had an injured hand. The investigators reviewed the medical records from that day and found the story plausible. On February 4, 2017, Chanel was brought to the police station and voluntarily provided his DNA for analysis. Would a perpetrator willingly do this? Detectives wondered. The interrogation began on the morning of February 5th. He admitted that he was indeed in the park around 5 p.m. on August 2, 2016, but clarified he was walking on dirt paths, not through the thickets, and listening to music. He confessed to encountering a young woman jogging with her phone in her hand. When asked by detectives if something happened when he encountered her, Chanel nodded and quietly said yes. Chanel's vague answers to investigators left everyone confused. He eventually said he was angry and that what happened happened. Investigators were skeptical of this confession, as it could raise questions for the jury at trial. They hoped Chanel would provide more details. Chanel explained that he had gone for a walk in the park to clear his mind after a family argument. Then he saw Karina walking alone and decided to follow her. He said that as she passed him, he grabbed her by the shoulders, wrestled her to the ground, and hit her in the face about 5 times to stop her from screaming. He said his punches knocked out some of her teeth and he injured her hand. Chanel noted that the struggle lasted about 5 minutes, during which she fought back violently, scratching and biting his. Chanel dragged her off the path into tall grass, where he tried to undress and assault her. Despite her shock, she continued to resist until Chanel strangled her. Then he realizing only afterward that she was no longer alive. When asked if he had known the victim before, he replied he did not know her before this. It all happened by chance. The motive for his actions was even more surprising. He revealed that loud music from a neighborhood gang member had triggered his anger and uncontrollable aggression. Negative emotions were directed at the unfortunate woman, which seemed like a strange reason for the act. Investigators were no longer confused after obtaining DNA results that matched exactly. Microscopic traces found on Karina's body and phone belonged to Chanel. With this evidence, the police and prosecutor concluded that the case was ready for court. However, the motive still seemed unclear. It's possible that Chanel had seen Karina before, since he often visited the park and may have noticed her with her father. He might have developed an interest in her and tried to approach her, but after being rejected, he became angry and attacked her, resulted in a tragic incident. This explanation would make more sense. The trial against Chanel Lewis began on November 5, 2018. Despite his previous statements to the authorities, he pleaded not guilty, a claim supported by his family, who denied his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Chanel with murder and sexual assault, with potential penalties ranging from 25 years or life in prison. The debate about Chanel's guilt played out not only in the courtroom but also in the media. Chanel's defense team questioned whether the police followed proper procedures during his arrest, along with various news outlets alleging racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these claims as unfounded, stating that the investigation followed legal procedures. The prosecution provided solid evidence and DNA analysis results. In contrast, the defense argued that the evidence was inadequate and compromised due to the high number of people present at the crime scene, including the victim's father, who found her body. Forensic biologist Linda Rosano noted that the likelihood of the DNA matching someone other than Chanel was 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecutor also presented his phone records, which showed internet searches related to second chances and forgiveness in Catholicism, raising the question of what sin Chanel was trying to make amends for. Additionally, the release of Chanel's confession video led to more controversy, because his lawyer asserted that he confessed under great pressure from the police. They alleged that police may have fabricated evidence by starting the recording only after Chanel was coerced and that the search of his home did not follow proper procedures. The defense argued that the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death was mishandled at the start. As public pressure for the suspect's arrest grew, Chanel Lewis became the scapegoat. The jury took the defense's arguments seriously but still had difficulty reaching a verdict. This led the judge to declare a mistrial on November 21, 2018. A retrial was initially set for January 22, 2019, but was later rescheduled for March. After 5 hours of reconsideration, Chanel Lewis was found guilty of Karina Vetrano's murder and sentenced to life without parole on July 23, 2019. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jared Bridegon. Jared Bridegon was born in 1989 in Florida, to a modest family. He was the second of 2 sons, and he was very close to his older brother, Adam. His family was heavily involved with the Church of Jesus Christ of Saints. As Jared entered his teenage years, he met a girl named Mallory Bowden through the church. The two began a date relationship, with she considering Jared her first true love. However, their religious community discouraged living together before marriage, which caused Jared and Mallory to eventually separate. This occurred after Jared graduated from a high school in Florida in 2007. Then, he decided to pursue further education in another state. Jared moved to Utah for college, where he would meet his future first wife at a friend's birthday party. In 2009, Jared, then 20 years old, met Shauna Gardner, 22 years old, from a wealthy family. Shauna was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She was born in 1987 to parents Sterling and Shelley Gardner, who co-founded Stampin' Up!, a major company that produces and sells craft items. By 2010, the family business, based in Salt Lake City, generated an annual revenue of $100 million. She has a sister named Sarah, who holds a managerial position in the family business. Growing up in a wealthy family, Shauna enjoyed luxury and a life of leisure. She didn't work as a chef, despite being trained in that profession. People described her as enthusiastic but also a bit indecisive. Initially, Jared wasn't overly interested in her. However, Shauna made an effort to draw him in with her lavish lifestyle, suggesting they could travel the world and do as they pleased, thanks to her parents' financial support. The couple's relationship moved quickly. Just a few months after meeting, they got engaged. By early 2010, they had married in a lavish temple ceremony in Salt Lake City, Utah, the Shauna family covering all expenses. Their decision to marry quickly was influenced by their strong religious beliefs. After getting married, Shauna and Jared moved to Utah, where they bought a comfortable home, valued at around $1 million, with the help of the bride's parents. Each of them owned a Mercedes, despite Jared still being in school and Shauna not having a job. They took many luxurious trips around the world and often posted about their adventures, expensive buys, and hobbies on social media. Friends close to they said that Shauna's parents gave them about $10,000 each month for expenses and also let them use their accounts freely. Jared received a generous gift of $100,000 from his in-laws after completing his degree, which he used to start his own business. The following year, 2013, they welcomed a set of twins, a daughter named Abigail and a son named Liam. Initially, the family resided in Connecticut, but they soon relocated after Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues. The move was recommended by doctors, who advised that a coastal location would be beneficial for Liam's health. The Jared family consequently settled in Florida, purchasing a comfortable 2-story home near the coastline in Ponte Vedra Beach, south of Jacksonville. During this time, Shauna managed her social media blog, where she presented herself as a loving wife and caring mother. Jared and Shauna were a couple who took fitness seriously, often visiting the gym together. Noticing his wife's dedication, Jared decided to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. However, soon after they relocated, the couple faced significant marital issues. Even so, they still choose to save face and pretend that everything is fine. Shauna's feelings about their religion began to shift. She lost interest and nearly stopped attending church services, while Jared still stands his ground. This difference in faith and devotion caused ongoing tension and arguments. Furthermore, Shauna's perception of Jared had also changed. She felt he had become lazy, gained weight, and lacked focus on starting his business. Jared completed online courses in programming and design. He then got a job at Microsoft, which helped him gain financial independence. Over time, he advanced to a senior manager position. However, his relationship with his wife began to deteriorate, and frequent arguments became a common occurrence in their home. The situation worsened when Jared discovered intimate conversations between his wife and her fitness trainer, causing him to suspect they were having an affair with each other. Although his wife denied this, the coach confirmed Jared's suspicions via phone call. Jared then contacted his friend, Meller Bowden, via email, lamenting that his wife had become distant from him and increasingly attached to her fitness trainer. Despite this, he expressed his desire to forgive her and work through their issues for the sake of their children. Unfortunately, their efforts to repair the relationship were unsuccessful. In 2015, after nearly 6 years of marriage, the couple began a contentious divorce, battling over shared assets and child custody. Jared publicly accused Shauna of being unfaithful, which she vehemently denied, claiming instead that the marriage had lost its love. In turn, she accused Jared of being cruel and behaving offensively. A dispute between Shauna and Jared led to disagreements over the division of assets and custody of their twin children. Shauna claimed that most of their possessions, including their home, cars, and bank account funds, were gifts or purchased by her parents. She believed Jared had no claim to these items because he had only recently started working after spending years on his education. Jared countered that he was entitled to at least half of their Florida home, citing his contributions over the years. Shauna and Jared also had intense disputes about the custody of their twins. Shauna accused Jared of manipulating the children against her when he was with them, coaching them on what to say about she and recording their statements to use as evidence in court. In response, Jared accused she of snooping on his private life by installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and tracking his movements. Shauna sought sole custody of the children and sole ownership of their seaside home. She also accused Jared of attempting to withdraw from the children's trust funds for his own use. He retaliated by accusing of tax evasion and claiming that she received thousands of dollars in income working at the family company without paying taxes. By the end of 2015, the court had awarded Jared and Shauna joint custody of their children, but this decision did not bring an end to their disputes. Despite their divorce being finalized, they continued to engage in lengthy court battles for nearly 7 more years, leading to a tragic outcome. During this time, both Jared and Shauna had new families and having more children. Jared met Christina, a fellow Microsoft employee from North Carolina, in 2016. At first, they were just friends, but eventually developed into a dating relationship. A few months later, Christina relocated to Florida to be with Jared. In the fall of 2017, Jared and Christina got married. In February 2019, they had a daughter named Bexley. They then had a son named London in August 2021. Around the same time, Shauna also married again in 2018 to a man named Mario Fernandez who owned a real estate business. Mario was a year her junior. In 2018, Shauna and Mario had a son named Michael. They later moved into the house where Shauna used to live with her ex-husband, Jared. Jared and Shauna's ongoing conflict continued despite both having started new families. They still filed lawsuits against each other, making new demands. One major point of contention was Jared's insistence that if Shauna was not present, her new husband Mario should not be allowed to be with their twins, Abigail and Liam. Simultaneously, he also seeking greater involvement for his new wife Christina in raising Abigail and Liam. On the other hand, Shauna alleged that Jared was trying to humiliate her by not allowing her to use the larger, safer family vehicle to transport the children. Their last court meeting, which took place 4 months before Jared's death, was exceptionally tense. Both parties leveled new accusations, and their property rights continued to be a point of dispute. Following their divorce, a court ruling granted Shauna exclusive use of the larger vehicle and required Jared to pay her $600 in compensation. Jared would pick up Abigail and Liam every Wednesday to spend time together. They would meet for dinner, with their younger sister Bexley occasionally joining them. On Wednesday, February 22, 2022, Jared followed their routine. He picked up Abigail and Liam, took them to a coastal cafe for dinner, and then they went for a walk. After that, he took his 2 children to Shauna's house and headed home via his usual route, which took about 40 minutes. Part of this route included a deserted and poorly lit stretch of road. As Jared drove slowly in the dark, aware that his 3-year-old daughter, Bexley, was asleep in her car seat, he suddenly spotted a tire in his lane. It was around 9 p.m. Jared stopped the car, turned on his hazard lights, and got out to move the tire to the side of the road. Then several shots rang out. Jared didn't have time to react, because the shooter acted with precision, firing multiple bullets at close range, and later fleeing the scene. Bexley was not injured or harmed in this incident. A passerby witnessed the aftermath of the shooting and cautiously approached Jared's body, which was lying in a pool of blood. The passerby immediately called for police and paramedics, but unfortunately, they arrived too late to save Jared. The investigation began with a suspicious timeline. Just before the incident, Jared had called his wife, Christina, to let her know he was on his way home. However, when Jared didn't arrive after an hour, Christina tried calling him again, this time reaching a police officer who informed her of the incident and asked her to report to the Jacksonville Beach Police Station. The police investigation at the scene revealed that Jared's car had stopped due to a tire on the road. They concluded that Jared had exited his vehicle to remove the obstacle, at which point he was shot. Fortunately, Bexley, who was asleep in the back seat, was unharmed, suggesting that she was not the target of the shooter. The fact that Jared's wallet, phone, and tablet were still in the vehicle, with no valuables missing, led investigators to quickly rule out robbery as a motive. Christina was asked if her husband had any known enemies or recent conflicts. She said she didn't know of anyone who wanted to harm him, except possibly his first wife, Shauna. However, she didn't want to make any direct accusations without solid proof. The police couldn't find any surveillance footage of the incident because there were no cameras in the area where it happened. A witness did hear the shots. Then they did hear a vehicle speeding away, and they couldn't see anything in the dark. Christina suggested that Shauna was involved in the crime, a theory that seemed possible to investigators. However, investigators suspect Shauna had an accomplice, as she had an alibi at the time of the crime. She was at home with Mario, Abigail, and Liam, Michael, and visiting parents at the time of the incident. To gather more evidence, the police reviewed nearby surveillance footage. To further investigate, detectives checked the footage from nearby surveillance cameras. The footage showed a dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident occurred. The same vehicle was seen again on camera a few minutes after the witness reported hearing shots. Jared's family made public appeals asking anyone with information, no matter how small, about the case to come forward. The police arrested Shauna and her current husband, Mario, as their first suspects. Despite multiple questioning sessions, they both denied any involvement in the murder. Shauna acknowledged that her relationship with Jared was complicated, but insisted she would never harm him. In an emotional interview, Shauna shared how Abigail and Liam reacted to the news of Jared's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam was in shock and remained silent for a long time. A notable absence at Jared's funeral was that of his ex-wife Shauna and older children, Abigail and Liam. When Christina told Shauna that didn't want her at the ceremony, Shauna responded that if she couldn't attend, neither would their children. Almost a year after the murder, in January 2023, the first suspect was finally arrested. Before that, the police have remained silent on the progress of the investigation, only admitting that a lot of time and resources are needed. A new clue has been found when a dark blue Ford F-150, possibly related to the case, caused an accident and then fled in a crowded area. Fortunately, numerous cameras in the vicinity captured footage, allowing authorities to quickly identify the suspect. The vehicle was owned by 62-year-old Henry Tennant, an unemployed man with a history of convictions. Henry was subsequently charged with multiple offenses, including second-degree premeditated murder using a firearm, participating in a conspiracy to commit murder, and setting up an ambush to obstruct the victim. Jacksonville Beach Police Chief Jonathan Paul Smith and City Prosecutor Melissa Nelson held a press conference to announce the charges against Henry. During the conference, it was revealed that Henry was not the only one involved. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he had agreed to testify against his accomplices. However, their names were not disclosed to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Henry with his friend had been living in a rental house owned by Mario. The police questioned Henry's housemate, but he did not have any valuable information about the case. Although he lived with Henry, the housemate had no personal relationship with the owner, Mario, only paying rent through a middleman, Henry. A thorough search of the house led to a significant discovery: a hidden pistol in Henry's room. Ballistic tests later confirmed that this pistol was the murder weapon, further implicating Henry in the crime. Mario Fernandez was arrested on March 16, 2023, after his accomplice, Henry, pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against him. Mario was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and incitement to commit a serious crime. Rumors soon emerged that Shauna was the mastermind behind the murder. These allegations were supported by two key witnesses: her former lover, a fitness trainer, and a tattoo artist she regularly visited. The fitness trainer revealed that Shauna said that she really hates her ex-husband, Jared, and had wished for his death. The tattoo artist shared a similar account, stating that Shauna had complained about the ongoing legal battles with Jared and had inquired about potential ways to silence him permanently. Shauna initially made the inquiry in a joking manner, but she repeated it months later, showing her serious intent. Despite denying all allegations and initially stating her to cooperate with the investigation, but Shauna moved to Washington with her children a few months after Mario's arrest. On August 17, 2023, Shauna was arrested in her Washington apartment and was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and incitement to commit a serious crime. She was extradited to Florida to stand trial alongside Mario and the other suspects. It is believed that Shauna's motives stem from her complicated relationship with Jared, as well as the desire to avoid sharing custody of their two children and the desire to have complete control over shared assets. The case is ongoing and charges are being pursued against everyone involved. Henry, an individual associated with the case, has pleaded guilty and is cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. Even so, he faces a minimum sentence of 15 years in prison, which would be life-altering given his advanced age. Mario Fernandez, Shauna's husband and a co-conspirator, has partially admitted his guilt, but refusing to testify against his wife. In contrast, Shauna denies all charges. However, prosecutors are asking for the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole for both Shauna Gardner and Mario Fernandez Saldana. Meanwhile, their three children are in the care of their maternal grandparents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, and their aunt, Sarah. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Nathan Pete. Nathan Pete was born on February 12, 1982 in Tamining, Guam. Nathan was not only lucky to be born in a wonderful land, but also grew up in a large and loving family. He has 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, Eric, and a sister, Carmela. All of his siblings are very friendly and always ready to help their parents in everything. Nathan stands out from the others because he never causes trouble. At home, he is a thoughtful son, and at school, he is a diligent student. His outgoing personality helps Nathan make friends easily. He was always the center of attention and his name was often mentioned. Nathan grew up near the ocean and loved swimming since he was a child. Later, he was also passionate about surfing. He often spent all his free time on the beach, enjoying the sunshine and coastal life. While studying at South High School in Santa Rita, Nathan met Michelle, who would later become his wife. He was attracted to her from the first time they met. They began to spend a lot of time together and their feelings grew deeper. They were always together, studying, preparing for schoolwork and helping with housework. Their strong teenage friendship gradually turned into sweet love. When Michelle was 16, her family suffered a great loss when her mother passed away. Michelle spends all her time helping her older sister Melissa, the oldest in the Michelle family, take on the role of mother and manager of the family. Nathan has always supported Michelle and helped take care of the younger siblings. In 2000, after graduating, Nathan proposed to Michelle and she accepted. Because they could not afford a wedding, with the consent of their families, they decided to move in together and start a new life. Nathan found a job as a receptionist at a local hotel. His income was enough to cover his living expenses. However, like many other young people, Nathan and Michelle had their own ambitions. They planned to have their own house and independent life. After getting married, Nathan and Michelle welcomed their first son, Dion. Nathan decided to join the Air Force to improve their family's life because his income was not sufficient. After graduating, Nathan was assigned to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. Although Michelle had to stay home to take care of the children, the family had a stable income. Gradually, their dream became a reality. They built their own house and had a second daughter, Miara. Nathan's success in the military motivated both of them to strive for things they had never achieved before. Finally, after 6 years of being engaged, Michelle and Nathan had a big wedding. Eric shared, "My mother was extremely proud that her youngest son was the first in the family to have a successful career." In 2006, Nathan was transferred to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. There, he was promoted to the position of weapons loader for an A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft in one of the Essex squadrons. He also received additional training in logistics and material management. Nathan was passionate about his work and always tried his best. More importantly, he worked with the spirit of serving his country. One colleague described Nathan as a son of the country. In 2007, Nathan and his family moved to Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada, to take up a new job. There, he was assigned as a junior officer in charge of the supply department, serving the maintenance of fighter aircraft. Along with the development of his career, Nathan's family also grew. Soon after, the Peets welcomed 2 more sons, Drawn and David. Michelle loved life in Las Vegas and considered it an ideal place to live. To please his wife, Nathan decided to find the most suitable house for their large family, a spacious and airy house. The family's dream house was located about 30 to 40 minutes away from the military base. Nathan used his savings to pay for the down payment. Now, the most important thing was to manage the family's income and expenses reasonably. He might need to save more in the future. At least until Pete had a new business opportunity. Initially, Michelle was excited about the unexpected gift from her husband and started planning for their new life. However, over time, the cost of living increased. They spent more than Nathan's income, and the joy of the new house gradually faded. Everyone knows that financial difficulties can destroy the relationships of many couples, and Nathan and Michelle were no exception. Realizing the difficult situation of the family, in mid-2009, Nathan volunteered to join the army when the United States was at war with Iraq. He was away for 6 months, and during this time, the family's financial situation improved significantly, which pleased Nathan. While Nathan was risking his life on the battlefield, Michelle was worried and scared about having to take care of 4 children alone. She was used to a stable life and could hardly imagine a different one. To dispel her worries, Michelle found a job at a telemarketing company for corporate credit cards. The job brought variety and new relationships to Michelle's life. She wanted financial independence and did not rule out the possibility of opening her own business in the future. Therefore, she actively developed herself by studying at beauty school. When Nathan was at home, everything went on as usual. However, when he was away, Michelle felt lonely. Having children and her husband's long business trips had cooled their relationship. Michelle longed for affection, so she had an affair with Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a handsome colleague. However, Michael was a cunning and dishonest man. He had been imprisoned in 2007 for forgery and attempted theft. Michelle could not resist Michael, whom she jokingly called Sweet Rudy, behind his back. At the end of 2009, Nathan returned home. Although it seemed that the distance and challenges had improved the family relationship, in reality, they had not. Michelle was living a double life. She did not want to lose her husband but was still infatuated with Michael. So she tried to please Nathan in every way. Nathan was fascinated by the changes in Michelle's appearance and personality. During his absence, the children had grown up, and their studies were negatively affected. Therefore, he decided to stay with the family for a long time. Because of his pure and loyal nature, Nathan did not think that Michelle's surprising changes could be related to her infidelity. In Las Vegas, Nathan sought to earn extra income by working the night shift for a higher salary in tutoring baseball to children. However, Michelle could no longer hide her dissatisfaction. As their living conditions deteriorated, her attitude became more negative. Over time, their relationship deteriorated beyond repair. On Thanksgiving 2010, Eric and his wife Veronica visited Day. For the first time, Eric noticed a clear tension between Nathan and Michelle. They had changed significantly, and a previous affection seemed to have disappeared. They could not hide their personal and financial difficulties, which were evident in the nearly empty pantry and refrigerator. A week later, on December 1, 2010, Michelle and Michael exchanged suspicious text messages. At 11:12 p.m., Michael texted Michelle, "Hope you're feeling better. Plans for tomorrow are almost complete." 2 minutes later, he texted again, "If you're not feeling well, let me know. I can give you more time. I appreciate your help." At 11:19 p.m., Michelle replied, "My husband just woke me up. He was getting ready to go out, but I thought he would be late today. I'm sorry this plan has caused you trouble." In the months before the tragedy, Michelle had been conflicted about her relationship with Nathan. She did not want to be with him anymore, but she did not want a divorce because she was worried about the financial and emotional consequences. Michelle thought that Nathan would not support her after the breakup, and that the alimony might not be enough to sustain her. In addition, Michelle knew about Nathan's military insurance. If he died, she would receive about $65,000. These thoughts made Michelle feel guilty and uneasy. One day, she shared these thoughts with Michael and was surprised when he showed interest in the matter. Michelle's initial idea about his ex-lover evolved into a more elaborate plan. Michael realized that the plan was too complicated for him and Michelle to carry out alone, so he recruited his friend Corey Alexis Hawkins. Corey, 33, was a mercenary with a criminal record for theft and fraud. With a criminal nature, he agreed to help but demanded a large reward, estimated at $20,000. After careful consideration, Michelle and Michael agreed to this condition. Later, their group was joined by 3 more people: Jessica Austin, 23, Corey's girlfriend, and her friends, Shannon. Shannon was promised 5% of the commission from Corey and Jessica for helping, and this large sum convinced her to join. The original plan was to shoot Nathan in his Chevrolet Tahoe, then drive the car containing the victim's body to an apartment complex parking lot. Jessica was responsible for purchasing essentials such as men's gloves, car covers, and perfume. Shannon would provide an alibi for Michael by confirming he was with her on the day of the murder, if necessary. On December 1, 2010, Michelle reported feeling unwell and came home early at 5:30 p.m., a departure from her usual routine due to her beauty school class finishing late. At around 10:40 p.m., Michelle arrived home, just 5 minutes before Nathan was due to leave for his night shift. Michelle found her husband asleep on the sofa. She woke him up and suggested they go upstairs together. He agreed. That was their last night together. Nathan was rushing downstairs because he was late for work. At the same time, Michelle and Michael were exchanging coded messages to avoid detection. Michael and his accomplice were sitting in a black Cadillac SRX, parked in front of the victim's house. They were wearing rubber gloves to avoid leaving any traces. Michael realizes that Nathan's military training could reduce the chances of his plan succeeding. So he decides to attack from behind. Michael pulls out a pistol and shoots Nathan 5 times in the back. Michael quickly drove out of the garage. At the same time, the criminals fled to a prepared location. There, they burned their clothes in the fireplace and destroyed the remaining evidence. Michael and Shannon then went to a hotel to create an alibi for themselves. Meanwhile, Jessica carefully cleaned up the apartment where they were staying. The police and emergency services were on the scene. They were shocked by the incident, as the Peak family's neighborhood was considered one of the safest and most exemplary. Detective Todd Williams began his investigation of the shooting scene by examining the garage. The garage door was unlocked. When he entered, he smelled a strong odor of iron. Blood was everywhere on the walls, in the car, and on the floor. Next to Nathan's uniform, the detective found his keys and wallet. Since the valuables were still intact, he ruled out the possibility of a robbery and murder. After examining the scene, Detective Laurie Anderson decided to interview his wife, Michelle. Michelle recounted the incident and revealed that the family was having financial difficulties. This information suggested several possibilities to the police. Nathan may have been hiding from his wife about his gambling addiction, debt, or infidelity. These theories could explain why Nathan was attacked. However, the available evidence suggested that Nathan may have been deliberately framed. Police checked his cell phone and found only photos of his wife and children, suggesting that Nathan was a good man. The investigation is ongoing. The next step is to investigate the surrounding neighborhood, as there are often witnesses or people who have heard something. As expected, several neighbors reported seeing a car parked near Nathan's house, driven by a man in a brown sweatshirt. The car left shortly after the gunshots were heard. This information gave detectives an important lead to continue their investigation. Nathan's family was shocked and they heard the news. They took the first flight out of Guam and were waiting for details. Nathan's mother, Carmelita Pete, cried the entire trip, unable to accept that her son had died so soon. When the family arrived at his house, Michelle hugged her mother-in-law and fainted. However, Nathan's mother sensed something was off about her daughter-in-law's reaction. She suspected that Michelle's fainting spell might be faked. Investigators decided to interview Michelle again. They asked her about the car that the witnesses had seen. Surprisingly, she revealed that her co-worker Michael Rodriguez also owned a similar car. Michelle's motive for sharing this information was still unclear. However, thanks to her information, the pieces of the case began to fit together. The police then concluded that either Michelle was lying or the perpetrator's plan was flawed. Investigators looked into Michael's background and discovered that he had a criminal record, which made them even more suspicious. When questioned, Michael remained calm and said that on the evening of Nathan's murder, around 9 p.m., he was shopping at the supermarket. There, he met a girl named Shannon. After chatting for a while, they decided to go to the hotel together at around 11 p.m. To verify Michael's story, the police contacted Shannon. She confirmed that the meeting was real. However, the detective felt that something was wrong, so he decided to check the information on Michelle's phone. Experts recovered text messages exchanged between Michelle and Michael over the past year. The content of their conversations was very suspicious. In particular, on the day Nathan was murdered, they discussed a contract with a man named Corey. This conversation seemed more like a form of encryption than a normal business negotiation. This made the detective suspect that this could be how the murder was planned. Investigators were almost certain that both Michelle and Michael were involved in the case, but due to a lack of conclusive evidence, they released Michael while the investigation continued. After examining Michelle's phone, they called her back for further questioning. Michelle appeared restless and seemed to be hiding something. Realizing that the police knew more than she had anticipated, she decided to reveal her affair with Michael. Michelle eventually confessed that a few months before her husband's death, she and Michael had planned to kill Nathan for insurance money. However, she claimed that she later regretted it and abandoned the idea. It appears that she changed her mind during the preparation of the crime. She felt guilty towards her husband and tried to interfere with the plan by turning off his alarm clock. Michelle believed that her accomplice would not wait or miss Nathan, but investigators did not trust her remorse. Her correspondence suggested otherwise. Furthermore, she sent Michael a smiley face emoji shortly after learning of her husband's death. Shannon later went to the police station to confess. She realized her predicament but attempted to downplay her role in the case. She explained that Michael had forced her to provide an alibi. Jessica had asked her for help, mentioning that her friends wanted to teach a big drug dealer a lesson. Shannon's job was to cover up the involvement of one of the attackers. According to her explanation, it was a way to seek justice. She added that Michael had disclosed the whole truth on the night of the attack. Shannon confirmed to the police that as soon as she realized she had been used, she went to report it. She also feared for her life, not knowing what they would do to her. Her testimony was confirmed by the hotel's security cameras. It was clear that Michael and Shannon arrived at the hotel at 11:40 p.m., not 11 p.m. as Michael had previously stated. Shannon's testimony led detectives to Corey and Jessica. But Corey denied any involvement in the crime. To honor the memory of young Sergeant Nathan, his family and friends held a memorial service on December 7, 2010, at the chapel at Nellis Base. Michelle decided not to attend the service, perhaps because she was not in the mood. Many of Nathan's teammates remembered his endurance and tenacity in the military. The squadron commander spoke of Nathan's outstanding achievements for his country and family. Everyone considered him a trusted teammate and noted his humility and dignity. Beside that, in a speech, Eric recalled, "My brother was always an example to the whole family. He loved life and was devoted to his wife and children. Everything Nathan did was for his country, his love, and his friends." On December 9th, Nathan's remains were returned to Guam. On December 15th, a requiem mass was held at St. Francis Church in Tamining. Sergeant Nathan's funeral was solemnly conducted at the Pity City Cemetery on Guam. The funeral cortege consisted of 36 motorcycles. At the burial site, 6 officers carried the coffin draped with the American flag. Then, a 21-gun salute rang out. Nathan Pete was sent off as a hero. Michael Rodriguez, Corey Hawkins, and Jessica Austin were arrested without bail on December 8, 2010. Michelle Pete was also arrested the following day. Police were concerned about Michelle's mental state and placed her under surveillance to prevent her from committing suicide. On January 4, 2011, all four were arraigned in Clark County District Court. They were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, armed robbery, and murder with a firearm. Michael and Corey were also charged with possession of a firearm. The trial lasted 3 years. Several defendants denied any involvement in the case. With the support of strong legal teams, the defendants made several requests to exclude certain evidence from the case. However, the court denied all of these requests, and they were only able to delay the verdict by repeatedly postponing the trial. On September 21, 2015, the trial for the murder of Nathan Pete began. Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, the first suspect to stand trial, pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. On September 29, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michael's appeal was rejected. He showed no emotion upon hearing the verdict and displayed no remorse for his actions. A month later, Michelle Pete appeared in court in Las Vegas. She claimed that she had changed her mind about killing her husband. When allowed to speak, Michelle turned to the victim's parents with tears in her eyes, apologized, and said she loved Nathan and their children. She admitted she was confused and had made a big mistake, then fainted. However, the prosecutor did not believe that Michelle truly wanted to stop the plot to kill her husband. There was substantial evidence that Michelle was more involved in the case than she admitted. It was difficult to understand how a mother of 4 could commit such a heinous crime. The judge sided with the prosecution. Michelle pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a firearm to avoid the death penalty. The victim's family also requested that the death penalty not be imposed. The judge described Michelle's actions as incomprehensible. In October 2015, the third defendant, Corey Alexis Hawkins, also pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison and his application for parole was denied. The judge found Corey had participated in the planning and had been present at the scene of the shooting. Jessica Austin also reached a plea deal with prosecutors and was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. In March 2016, Michelle received her final sentence. She once again cited her emotional instability as the cause of her crime and asked Nathan's family for forgiveness. Carmelita Pete, Nathan's mother, was a very religious person, saw that her ex-daughter-in-law was truly remorseful and sorrowful for her actions. Carmelita believed Michelle needed forgiveness and therefore forgave her in court. She added that the most severe punishment Michelle had to endure was that her children did not want to see her anymore. They were afraid she would harm them like she had harmed their father. Eric Pete told Michelle that their family did not want revenge. It seemed that her mother-in-law's words had impacted her. The family would continue to live without her, and the children would grow up knowing their mother was a murderer. Eric's wife, Veronica, also wanted to speak. She expressed her hatred for Michelle and added that she had disgraced her family by pursuing greed and the love of a stranger. Michelle had destroyed her family. She killed the man she deeply loved, the man with whom she shared her life and built a future. Veronica asked if Michelle realized the consequences of her reckless ambition. It was hard to imagine. Such people always chase happiness without appreciating what they have. Nathan devoted his whole life to giving his all, unlike her. He often lacked sleep and took risks with his health and life. Thanks to that sacrifice, Nathan fulfilled his lover's dreams but never received recognition from her. The Pete children will carry lifelong psychological trauma. They will have difficulty building happy families and integrating into society. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Rob Andrew. Brenda Evers was born on December 16, 1963, in Enid, Oklahoma. Her parents were Christians. The family often gathered around the dinner table, prayed together, and participated in church activities. Brenda grew up to be a quiet and calm girl. She did well in school and spent a lot of time at church helping others. While many of her friends were dating, Brenda patiently waited for her ideal partner. While in high school, she cheered for the school's soccer team. Brenda was a moral and humble young woman, just like her mother. She loved to dance but did not go to parties often. Brenda's goal was to be a devoted wife and mother, devoting herself to her family after marriage. At the age of 17, Brenda met Rob Andrew, her friend's older brother. Rob was older and in college. They quickly discovered that they had much in common. Although they were from different branches of Christianity, Brenda was Lutheran and Rob was Baptist. They both held conservative views, attended church regularly, and wanted to raise a large, happy family. Their friendship gradually blossomed into romance. Brenda then went to college in Winfield, Kansas. Despite being 125 miles apart, they tried to keep in touch regularly. To be closer to her lover, Brenda transferred to a college in Stillwater, Oklahoma, a year later. By the end of the summer of 1984, they married. Not long after, Rob received an attractive job offer in Houston, Texas. Although he was hesitant, Brenda convinced her husband to accept it. While Rob developed his career as an advertising executive, Brenda also completed her degree and found a job in the banking industry. Brenda loved the bustling life in the big city, with its tall buildings and vibrant nightclubs. Texas changed her a lot. She became more confident, started taking care of herself, dressed fashionably, wore makeup, and made many friends. However, Rob was not happy with these changes. He believed that a woman of faith should be more restrained. In addition, Rob began to feel homesick. So when he received an offer to return to the advertising agency in Oklahoma City, he happily agreed. Brenda did not support her husband's decision, leading to an argument between the two. In the end, they agreed that Rob would move to the new place first, and if everything went well, his wife would follow. After several months of living apart, the family reunited. In the early 1990s, Rob and his wife moved into a luxury home in Landsbrook. 9 months later, they had their first daughter, Tricity. Brenda quit her job to become a stay-at-home mom and raise the children. 4 years later, they had their son, Parker. Their family life seemed perfect, with love, children, home, and wealth. Rob and Brenda were married for approximately 17 years and had 2 children together. As a deeply religious couple, they raised their children with strong faith and moral values. They regularly attended church as a family and participated in charitable activities. From the outside, their marriage appeared happy and stable. However, in October 2001, their family life unexpectedly fell apart when Brenda left Rob and initiated divorce proceedings. After that, Rob stopped by their old home to pick up their children for the holidays as planned. That evening, Brenda met him at the door and asked him to fix a broken appliance in the garage. As Rob bent down to check, he heard footsteps behind him. As he turned around, he was shot and fell to the concrete floor. At around 6 p.m., emergency services received a call from Brenda. She reported that she was injured and her husband was dead. An ambulance was dispatched immediately. When paramedics arrived, they found a horrific scene in the garage. A man was lying in a pool of blood, dead from a gunshot wound. His wife, Brenda, had a less serious wound to her arm. Brenda's clothes were covered in blood, and she appeared to be in shock. Paramedics confirmed that she was indeed in shock. Brenda said that she had tried to give Rob first aid, but she thought he was dead. They noticed that the victim's hand was bandaged. After the incident, Brenda was taken to the hospital for treatment. Police began investigating the scene as soon as the ambulance left. They found a .22 caliber bullet in the wall and a shotgun shell casing, indicating that multiple weapons were used. Police also found the victim's wallet intact, ruling out the possibility of a robbery. To clarify the incident, they needed to interview Rob's ex-wife. At the hospital, Brenda explained the reason for her encounter with Rob. She said that while they were together, two masked and armed men broke into the garage. The attackers shouted something that Brenda could not hear. One shot Rob twice, and the other shot and wounded Brenda as she tried to run away. Both attackers then fled. Brenda did not know the identity or motive of the attackers. She believed that Rob was unlikely to have enemies because he was kind and helpful. Brenda admitted that she was scared, especially since there were children in the house at the time of the attack. However, Brenda's story was inconsistent. The police suspected that she was not telling the truth, especially when they saw that the children had not packed for the trip. Interviewing neighbors also did not yield any useful information. No one noticed anything unusual that night. To learn more about Brenda and Rob's personal lives, detectives decided to interview people they knew. It turns out that after the birth of their second child, the relationship between Andrew and Brenda became strained. Andrew often complained to friends and pastors that Brenda mistreated him and hated their marriage. In addition, a close family friend commented that the couple's feelings seemed abnormal. Brenda often expressed her feelings openly, even in front of strangers. Rob seemed to love Brenda too much, as he had forgiven her inappropriate behavior for a long time. Family friends all noticed that Brenda had changed significantly. From a normal housewife, she had become a woman with a more liberal lifestyle. These accusations were well-founded and were backed by clear evidence. Brenda seemed to be going through a midlife crisis. Her style of dress changed significantly. From a refined woman, she changed to wearing revealing clothes and wearing too much makeup. Not only that, Brenda also became secretive with her husband. She did not share where she went, who she met, or what she did. Eventually, Rob discovered that his wife was having an affair. In October 1997, Brenda began an extramarital relationship with Rick Nunley, the husband of a friend and former co-worker at a bank in Oklahoma. They dated for a year, then only communicated by phone occasionally. Brenda then began a relationship with James Higgins, a local store owner. At first, James Higgins was attracted to Brenda's style of dress and flirtatiousness. They began seeing each other regularly once or twice a week after Brenda gave him a hotel room key. The relationship lasted about 5 years. During this time, Brenda's husband, Rob, was completely unaware of the affair. However, he realized that their marriage was in trouble. Brenda hardly spoke to or spent time with Rob anymore. Despite this, Rob remained hopeful that things would improve and tried his best to keep his family together. In 2001, Brenda ended her relationship with James Higgins. This decision had nothing to do with her husband or their marriage. Instead, Brenda had gradually fallen into a life of debauchery and vice. 2 years earlier, a Baptist church had been built in Oklahoma City, largely thanks to Rob's contributions. There, Rob became a deacon, and his wife took on the role of Sunday school teacher. Outwardly, their family appeared prosperous and adhered to traditional moral standards. At that time, Brenda still maintained the image of a model wife. She enthusiastically taught the children basic lessons about religion and friendship. At the church, Brenda met James Pavitt, a married part-time teacher and friend of Rob's. Although James was a devout Christian, he was attracted to Brenda's charm. They began seeing each other in the spring of 2001. At first, they kept their relationship secret, but it gradually became more public. Everyone in the church noticed their closeness. Rob suspected his wife of having an affair, and the two had a big argument. When James divorced his wife, Brenda and Rob also decided to divorce. Although Rob still wanted to save the marriage, Brenda was determined to file for divorce. Shortly after this event, a mysterious call was made to Rob's office, and then a serious car accident occurred, believed to be an assassination attempt on him. Rob became suspicious of Brenda and James, so he reported it to the police. Rob did not oppose the divorce and agreed to the custody arrangement for the children. He even supported Brenda financially. So, what was the motive for killing him? The motive was money. James Pavitt, who was also an insurance agent in addition to teaching, had sold Rob an $800,000 insurance policy that summer, with Brenda as the sole beneficiary. As police investigated the attack on Rob's family, they discovered two important things: the relationship between Brenda and James, as well as a problem with the family's car brakes. As the events connected, Brenda's role in her husband's murder became clearer. Finally, the police also found a new suspect. It was Brenda's new lover, James Pavitt. 2 weeks before the garage incident, Rob went to the insurance company to remove his wife, Brenda, from the policy because she was unfaithful. James, the insurance agent, refused, stating that only the beneficiary, Brenda, could make changes to the policy. Not trusting James, Rob checked with the management. The investigation revealed that Brenda and James had attempted to falsify the policy by transferring ownership to Brenda. They had forged Rob's signature and backdated the changes. James's supervisor confirmed to Rob that he was still the owner of the policy and that only the insured could make changes to it. When James learned of this discovery, he was furious, as it led to his dismissal. Investigators learned that Rob had a 16-gauge shotgun when he left the house. During the search of Brenda's house, Brenda did not turn the gun over, and it was not found, which was quite strange. However, when they searched neighbor's house, Judy Gigstad's house, they made an unexpected discovery. A shell casing from the sought-after handgun was found on the bedroom floor, along with several .22 caliber bullets in the Gigstad's attic. The Gigstads were not home at the time of the crime, and there were no signs of forced entry. Gigstad's family confirmed that Brenda had their spare key. In addition, a key piece of evidence came from Joanna Larson, James Pavitt's daughter. On the day of the crime, she lent her father her car with the promise that he would have it repaired. However, when Joanna retrieved the car, she discovered that it had not been repaired and found a .22 caliber bullet inside. When she informed her father, he told her to throw the bullet away. Investigators also discovered that James had purchased a handgun the week before the crime. Therefore, they planned to question James and Brenda. On November 23, Rob's funeral was held. The case was confusing to the victim's family and friends. What was suspicious was that Brenda, her children, and James Pavitt were all absent from the ceremony. This absence worried Rob's relatives and the police. Apparently, those who did not show up had fled, perhaps assuming that the police were searching for the perpetrators. By that time, the suspects had been identified. The autopsy results were released. Brenda's account of the attack differed significantly from the forensic report. As the police had suspected, 2 different weapons were used in the attack. Rob and Brenda's injuries did not match Brenda's description. The first shot at Rob was fired from a distance with a shotgun, while the second shot was fired at close range with a .22 caliber pistol. Brenda's arm was also shot at close range with the same .22. By analyzing the location and shape of the bloodstains on his clothes, it was concluded that Brenda was near Rob when he was shot. The angle of the bloodstains matched the shooter's position, indicating that Brenda herself fired the second shot at Rob. After receiving the autopsy results, Brenda and James were officially declared suspects and wanted. During their escape, James and Brenda eluded the police for many days. The authorities warned the border guards that they might have crossed into another country. However, no trace of them was found. After some time, it became clear that the two had left the country, with the police suspecting they were in Mexico. To catch them, the authorities decided to freeze their bank accounts. Without money, they would eventually be exposed. And sure enough, 3 months later, James contacted his daughter to ask for money. However, he did not expect that his daughter was cooperating with the investigation. Joanna had doubt that her father was involved in the case. It was clear he was hiding something. Thanks to James's call, the investigation discovered the perpetrator's hideout in the city of Cancun. In February 2002, James and Brenda were arrested at the border and turned over to U.S. authorities. They were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. The children were placed in the care of their grandparents. After their arrest, neither defendant cooperated with the investigation. They pleaded not guilty and spoke only when their attorneys were present. James was the first to appear in court. The prosecution built a thorough case. They presented information about James's past as an army sniper and his ability to use a gun. His illicit relationship and the plot to murder Rob were also mentioned. His daughter's testimony and physical evidence were presented. Ultimately, the jury found James guilty and sentenced him to death. Brenda's trial was different from James's. Instead of focusing on the details of the case, the prosecutors presented information about Brenda's character and personal life. They called her former lovers to testify, portraying her as unethical and untrustworthy. When questioned about her motive for killing her husband, Brenda claimed innocence and asked to be released if people truly believed her. However, the prosecutors countered by describing her as someone who did not love her husband and killed him for personal gain. To reinforce their argument, the prosecutors presented items from Brenda's suitcase when she fled to Mexico, including lingerie and sex manuals. They questioned whether a grieving widow would act like that. During the trial, the defense team tried to portray Brenda as a victim. They mentioned that she was injured in the attack, but forensic experts determined that she had inflicted the injuries on herself. The defense also produced a confession letter from James, but a handwriting expert confirmed that Brenda had forged the document. A shocking revelation from James's attorney was that Brenda would be the beneficiary of his insurance policy if he died. This suggested that Brenda may have plotted to kill James the same way she did Rob. Or perhaps she hoped to prove her innocence and frame James so that after he was executed, she would still receive the insurance money. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Brenda guilty and sentenced her to death. Both Brenda and James are currently on death row. Brenda has appealed repeatedly but has been unsuccessful. The crimes of Brenda and James were extremely serious. It is worth noting that they claimed to be religious and taught morality to children, which makes the case even more horrifying. Those who preach morality but do not follow it themselves are hypocrites and cruel. Such people cannot be trusted because they do not truly understand and live by moral principles.